Section 1. The Stranger in the Snow. The wind howled across the tiny border town of Silver Hollow, carrying with it sharp flecks of ice that stung the skin. Lila Moreau pulled her wool coat tighter and glanced toward the old clock in the corner of the apothecary. Nearly midnight. She should have been home hours ago, tucked under a quilt with a cup of tea, but the storm had rolled in fast, and she had lingered to finish mixing herbal tonics for the small group of miners who relied on her remedies. "Just one more jar," she murmured, corking the bottle. The power flickered, then cut out entirely, plunging the shop into shadows. Outside, the storm's fury battered the wooden walls like an angry sea. Lila grabbed a lantern from the counter and lit it with a practiced hand. She'd grown up on the edge of wilderness. Storms didn't frighten her. But the sound that followed did. A sharp crack of glass from the back room. Her pulse jumped. "Hello?" she called, her voice barely carrying over the shriek of the wind. No answer. Lila lifted the lantern and moved cautiously toward the noise, weaving between shelves of jars. The smell hit her first, iron and snow, sharp and unsettling. Then, just beyond the open back door, she saw movement. Something large staggered forward, half collapsing onto the wooden floor. The figure was massive, its shape obscured by a tattered cloak soaked dark with blood. Under the lantern light, she glimpsed pale skin marred by deep gashes and eyes. Eyes unlike any she had ever seen, gold and crimson, glowing faintly even in the dim. "Gods," she whispered, setting the lantern down as instinct took over. "You're hurt." The stranger lifted his head, and for an instant she saw not a man, but something far more dangerous, a fleeting glimpse of elongated fangs, the faint silhouette of lupin ears, and a presence that thrummed in the air like the echo of a thunderclap. He tried to speak, but only a hoarse growl emerged. Lila's fear tangled with something else, a strange, inexplicable pull. "Don't move," she said softly, kneeling beside him. "Let me help you." The storm screamed outside, but inside the apothecary, something ancient and fateful had just stepped across her threshold. Section 2. Blood and Shadows. The man, if she could call him that, slumped against the wall, his breath shallow. His cloak slipped, revealing not only the gashes along his side, but the way his muscles flexed unnaturally beneath skin too pale for anyone who'd been walking in the snow. Lila's healer's instincts kicked in. "You've lost a lot of blood," she murmured, pushing her sleeves up. She grabbed her satchel of emergency supplies and set to work, her hands steady despite the storm rattling the walls. Up close, his scent was overpowering: cold pine, metallic blood, and something sweetly intoxicating, like dark wine left to breathe. Every time she leaned in to clean a wound, her heart stuttered in her chest. When she pressed a cloth to his side, he flinched, then growled, not in pain, but as though some part of him objected to her touch. His eyes snapped open again, locking onto hers. "You shouldn't," he rasped. His voice was deep, rough-edged, with an accent she couldn't place. "Shouldn't what?" she asked, arching a brow. "Be near me." His gaze lingered on her throat, then flickered away as though ashamed. Lila forced a soft laugh, trying to break the tension. "Too late for that. If I left you, you'd bleed out on my floor, and I'm not about to mop that up come morning." Something shifted in his expression: confusion, almost amusement, but the pain pulled it away. She worked quickly, washing the worst wounds with hot water and antiseptic, binding his side with linen wraps. When she reached his shoulder, she froze. Beneath the shredded fabric of his shirt was a mark burned into his skin, a dark sigil in the shape of an eclipse. "What is this?" she asked before she could stop herself. His eyes, now brighter in the lantern light, met hers again. "The mark of what I am. And the reason. They'll come." "They?" But before he could answer, a low rumble rolled from his chest, too deep for human vocal cords. It resonated in her bones, made the lantern flame shiver. Outside, over the storm, she heard it, another sound answering him. A howl, long, mournful, and much too close. He caught her wrist in one large, cold hand. "If you want to live, you'll lock that door and bar it. Now." Her pulse hammered. She should have been terrified. But some quiet part of her already knew, whatever danger was out there, it was nothing compared to what she'd just let inside. Section 3. The First Truth. Lila's mind raced, but her body moved on instinct. She slammed the back door shut, dropping the heavy iron bar into place. The wind shrieked against the wood like a living thing. The man was already trying to stand, using the counter for balance. Even injured, he moved with a predatory grace, fluid, controlled, as if every muscle knew its purpose. "You're not going anywhere in that condition," she said firmly. He straightened, towering over her. "If they breach that door, it won't matter how deep my wounds are." She crossed her arms. "You're talking in riddles. Who's out there?" "Wolves." He tilted his head, the faintest smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Not wolves as you know them. And they're not after you, they're after me." Lightning flashed, illuminating his features for the first time. He was beautiful in a way that defied reason. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw dusted with stubble, lips curved with the hint of something dangerous. But his eyes, gold-ringed in red, were the most arresting of all. They burned with hunger, not for food, but for something older, deeper. The howls came again, closer now, joined by the crunch of snow under heavy steps. "They've found me," he muttered, scanning the room. "Found you? You make it sound like..." Lila stopped mid-sentence. His canines had lengthened, not fully like a wolf's fangs, but needle-sharp, unmistakably predatory. "You're..." "A mistake," he cut in, his voice low but fierce. "One that should have kept moving instead of collapsing in your shop." Lila stepped closer despite herself. "You're not just a wolf." His gaze flickered, conflicted. "No, I'm not just a wolf." Something heavy struck the barred door. Wood splintered. "Tell me what you are," she demanded, her voice shaking more with urgency than fear. He met her eyes, and for a moment, the storm seemed to fall away. "Half what they are, half what hunts them. Blood drinker and beast both. The worst kind of enemy to those outside, and the most dangerous thing you'll ever meet." Another blow rattled the door. This time, claws scraped against the wood. Lila's breath caught. "Then I think you'd better show me what that means." His lips curled in a feral smile. "As you wish." Section 4. Teeth in the dark. The lantern light trembled as the stranger stepped into the center of the shop. His movements shifted, no longer purely human, but something older, primal. Lila watched in stunned fascination as the change rippled through him. His spine straightened, then curved with an animal's readiness. Muscles thickened under pale skin, his hands flexing into clawed shapes. His fangs lengthened fully, glinting like polished ivory in the flicker of light. But unlike the snarling wolves she'd glimpsed in childhood stories, his transformation held something eerily elegant. His face kept its sharp beauty, his eyes blazing like molten metal, and a faint shimmer clung to his skin as if moonlight itself had been woven into him. The air thickened around them, electric, almost humming. "What are you?" she whispered, unable to look away. "Something born of two curses," he said, voice deeper now, layered with an echo that wasn't human. "Half vampire, half werewolf, condemned to walk in both worlds, welcomed in neither." The blows on the door grew frenzied, accompanied by guttural snarls. "Stay behind me," he commanded, and there was no space for argument in that tone. The door gave way in a spray of splinters. Three shapes surged inside, hulking, furred, with eyes burning like cold fire. They weren't ordinary wolves, their movements were too calculated, their bodies far too large. The hybrid moved before Lila could even register it. One heartbeat he stood before her, the next, he was a blur of claws and steel strength, colliding with the first attacker. The crack of bone echoed in the shop. The second wolf lunged, only to be caught mid-leap, its throat torn with brutal precision. The third hesitated, hackles raised, as if it understood this fight was already lost. But the hybrid's gaze locked on it, and something passed between them, an unspoken challenge. With a low growl, the creature backed toward the storm and vanished into the snow. Silence, save for Lila's ragged breathing. The hybrid turned back to her, the change slowly retreating until he stood human again, though the gold and crimson glow in his eyes lingered. Blood streaked his jaw and hands, but his chest rose and fell steadily, unshaken. "You should be afraid of me," he said, voice quiet now. Lila's pulse still raced, but her voice came steady. "I should, but I'm not." His jaw tightened, as if that answer complicated everything. Section 5. The Flight from Silver Hollow. The bodies lay in dark pools across the apothecary floor, steam rising faintly from the blood in the cold air seeping through the shattered doorframe. Lila swallowed hard, the metallic scent mixing with the sharp tang of the herbs lining her shelves. "You can't stay here now," the hybrid said, scanning the street beyond. His voice carried that same strange echo from before, but softer, controlled. "I wasn't planning to," she replied, grabbing her leather satchel and stuffing it with essentials, tonics, clean cloth, flint, a jar of concentrated salve. He glanced back at her. "Not planning to? You think this was a one-night visit? Those 3 were scouts. There will be more. Stronger. And they're after you." A muscle jumped in his jaw. "They're after what I am. They don't want my death as much as they want to prevent what I could become." She frowned, pulling her cloak tight around her shoulders. "And what's that?" His eyes met hers for a fraction of a second, unreadable. "Something worse than their nightmares." Before she could press him, a distant howl cut through the storm. Not like before. This one was deeper, almost resonant enough to rattle the window glass. He stiffened. "We go now," he said. "Leave everything that isn't worth dying for." The storm slapped at them the moment they stepped outside, wind clawing at their clothes, snow slicing their skin. The street lamps cast dim cones of light into the swirling white, and beyond them, shapes moved, too tall for wolves, too lean for men. He caught her wrist. "Stay close." They ran. His pace was impossibly fast, but he slowed just enough for her to keep up, guiding her around snowdrifts, through alleys, over fences. His grip was unyielding, his presence a constant shield against the biting cold and whatever stalked them in the dark. When they reached the tree line, he stopped abruptly. "From here, I'll have to carry you." "I can't," she began. "Not through this terrain," he said, already scooping her into his arms with effortless strength. "And not with what's coming behind us." She clutched the lapel of his torn coat, feeling the inhuman speed as he surged into the forest. The snow blurred past, branches whipping overhead. She was aware of his heartbeat, slow, steady, and far too strong for a man who'd been bleeding out minutes ago. Lila realized something else then. This wasn't just flight. He wasn't merely trying to save her from danger. He was taking her somewhere, and she had the unnerving sense it wasn't the first time he'd carried someone into the night like this. Section 6. The Hollow Refuge. Branches tore at Lila's cloak as the forest closed in around them. The hybrid's stride never faltered, swift, precise, silent, but for the crunch of snow underfoot. After what felt like hours, the storm's howl faded to a distant whisper. They broke into a clearing where a dark shape loomed half-hidden beneath drifts and pine boughs. A cabin, small but sturdy, its logs blackened with age. He set her down gently. Inside. She hesitated, scanning the shadows. "Is this yours?" His gaze flicked to her, a brief spark of humor in those molten eyes. "No. It belongs to no one who'd miss it." The door opened on creaking hinges, revealing a single-room interior warmed by the faint glow of embers in a stone hearth. The air smelled of old wood and pine resin, a sharp contrast to the metallic tang still clinging to him. He moved to the hearth, feeding it fresh logs until the flames roared higher. Only then did she see how much blood still soaked his side. "You're bleeding again," she said, stepping toward him. "It'll heal." "Not if you're dead before it does." She crossed to the table, setting out her satchel. "Sit. I've seen worse wounds on miners, and they didn't complain this much." For a moment he stood there, as though no one had dared give him orders in years. Then, with the faintest twitch of his mouth, he obeyed. Lila peeled back the makeshift bandages she'd wrapped earlier. The cuts were deep, some jagged as if torn by claws. His skin was unnaturally cold, yet when her fingers brushed his, she felt a pulse, slow, deliberate. "Tell me your name," she said without looking up. Silence stretched, filled only by the crackle of the fire. Then, "Dorian." Dorian what? Just Dorian. Names are dangerous, Lila Morrow. Her hands paused. You know mine. I knew it the moment you opened that door, he replied. His voice had softened, the edges smoothed into something almost reverent. She met his eyes, caught off guard by the intensity there. Why do I feel like that means more than it should? Dorian looked away, toward the fire. Because in my world, the moment you know a name, you owe it a piece of yourself. Section 7. Bloodlines and Betrayal. Lila bound the last strip of linen around his side, the white already blotched with dark crimson. Dorian stayed still, his gaze fixed on the fire as if the flames spoke to him. You said they're after what you are, she began cautiously. If I'm risking my life here, I deserve to know what that means. His jaw worked, like he was grinding down words before they escaped. Finally, he said, you've heard stories of vampires. You've heard stories of werewolves. What you haven't heard is what happens when one is born to both bloodlines. She blinked. That's possible? Not naturally. He glanced at her then, eyes glinting. I was an experiment. My mother, a wolf of an old mountain pack. My father, a vampire lord who believed mixing blood could forge the perfect predator. The result, me, was neither perfect nor welcome. The words were matter-of-fact, but there was a raw edge beneath them. They feared you, Lila guessed. They hated me, he corrected. The wolves saw a parasite in my veins. The vampires saw an animal in my soul. Neither claimed me. Neither could kill me without risking the balance they pretend to protect. Her stomach twisted. So now they both hunt you? Not both, Dorian said slowly. Only the wolves, those you saw tonight, have a purpose beyond blood feud. They believe a hybrid can inherit the strength of both species, and with that strength, challenge their alphas. To them, I'm a threat to their dominion. And to you, she asked. His gaze met hers, steady, unreadable. To me, I'm just alive. And trying to stay that way. Outside, the storm groaned against the cabin walls, but inside the fire threw shifting gold across his features, softening the dangerous lines. Lila studied him, weighing the man against the beast she'd seen earlier. You could have left me, she said quietly. When you heard them coming to my shop, you could have vanished and saved yourself the trouble. A flicker of something passed through his expression, something almost like guilt. I could have, he admitted. But then you'd be dead. And he trailed off, shaking his head. And you what? Dorian leaned forward, the shadows deepening in his eyes. And I couldn't let that happen. Not to you. Section 8. A Night Between Worlds. The wind outside had shifted. No longer the wild, unpatterned roar of a storm, but something rhythmic, pulsing. Lila noticed it first in her chest, a faint unease matching the cadence. They're moving, Dorian said, his voice a low growl. He was seated near the door now, leaning forward with elbows on his knees, every muscle coiled. How can you tell? He tapped a finger to his temple. I can hear the way their heartbeats fall into the snow. Too many for a hunting party, not enough for a warband. They're sweeping the forest. Lila shivered, though the cabin was warm. Looking for you. Looking for us, he corrected, and his eyes softened for the briefest moment. You're in this now, whether you meant to be or not. He rose and began pacing, each step a soundless shift of weight. The firelight caught on the faint patterns beneath his skin, veins like threads of silver and shadow. You can rest, he told her. They won't come tonight. Not if they're clever. You sound sure. I'm not. But if they do come, you'll be ready. Ready? She gave a short, incredulous laugh. I'm a healer, not a fighter. Dorian paused, his head tilting, a hint of a smile ghosting over his lips. The two aren't as far apart as you think. He crossed to the table and set something down before her, a long knife with a blackened steel blade, its hilt wrapped in dark leather. Silvered edge, he said. Won't do much to a vampire. But against a wolf, it's a song they can't dance to. Lila's fingers curled around the hilt. It felt strangely warm, as if it recognized her touch. And if I have to use this? Then you use it without hesitation, he said, his tone hardening. They won't show you mercy, so don't offer any in return. For a long moment, they just stood there, the storm murmuring at the edges of their silence. Then Dorian stepped closer, close enough that she could see the fine scar cutting through his right brow. "You're not afraid," he murmured, almost to himself. "I should be," she replied. "Yes," he said, a slow, dark smile forming. "You should." And somehow, she knew that he wasn't warning her about the wolves outside. Section 9. The Edge of Trust. The fire sank to glowing embers, casting the cabin in warm shadows. Lila sat on the floor near the hearth, the knife resting beside her. Dorian lingered by the window, a silhouette against the pale smear of moonlight filtering through the storm clouds. "Do you ever sleep?" she asked. His head turned slightly, the faint curve of his lips betraying amusement. "I do, but not when the air tastes of pursuit." She traced the grain of the wooden floor with her fingertips. "That sounds exhausting." "It is. But that's the cost of surviving when neither world wants you." Lila hesitated. "And yet, you saved me." Dorian's gaze lingered on her in a way that made her heart beat faster. "You think I save people often? You tell me." He stepped closer, the scent of cold pine and something darker filling the space between them. "No," he said simply. "You're the first." The words landed heavier than she expected. She wanted to ask why, but something in his expression told her the answer wasn't simple. Instead, she said, "My mother used to tell me stories about shadow beasts that lived between the trees. She said if you met their eyes, you'd see the truth of your own heart." "And what would you see?" he asked. Lila swallowed. "I don't know." Dorian crouched before her, the firelight dancing across the planes of his face. "I could tell you," he murmured, "but you might not want to hear it." "I'll take the risk." He held her gaze for a long moment, his gold and crimson eyes searching hers. "I see someone who doesn't belong in the small, quiet life she's forced herself into. Someone who carries more courage than she knows and more loneliness than she'll admit." Her breath caught, not because he was wrong, but because he was so dangerously right. The space between them seemed to hum. He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His hand lingered for a heartbeat too long, the coolness of his skin sending an involuntary shiver down her spine. Before either of them could speak, a sharp crack split the night. Not a branch breaking, closer, heavier. Dorian's head snapped toward the door, his posture shifting instantly from intimate to lethal. "They're here." Section 10. Siege at the Cavern. The sound came again, closer this time, followed by the low rumble of voices outside, words muffled but edged with threat. Dorian's expression hardened into something predatory. "Stay low," he ordered, already moving toward the door in a silent prowl. Lila's fingers curled around the knife, her pulse a rapid drum in her ears. The air seemed to thicken, each breath heavy with the scent of smoke, snow, and something feral pressing in from beyond the walls. A sudden thud rattled the door, then another. The hinges groaned. Dorian threw a glance over his shoulder. "If they break through, don't think, just strike." The wood splintered inward as a massive wolf thing lunged into the cabin. Its fur was slick with ice, its eyes a searing pale blue. Behind it, two more shapes crowded the doorway, snarling. Dorian moved faster than sight. One heartbeat, he stood in human form. The next, his body surged into that terrible, beautiful hybrid state, muscles expanding, claws glinting, fangs bared in a snarl that made the intruders falter. He hit the first attacker with bone-shattering force, sending it crashing into the far wall. The second came at him from the side, snapping for his throat. He caught it mid-leap, twisting, and the crack of its neck echoed through the cabin. The third wolf shifted mid-charge into a man tall, scarred, his grin cruel. "Still running, half-breed," he spat. Dorian's growl was almost a laugh. "Still failing to catch me." They collided in a blur of claws and steel. Lila pressed herself against the wall, knife ready, heart hammering as the fight tore through the small space. Splintered furniture, scattering embers, the stench of blood and wet fur. One of the wolves Dorian had downed was struggling to rise. It locked eyes with Lila and lunged. She didn't think she moved. The knife found its throat in a flash of silvered steel. Hot blood spilled over her hand, and the creature crumpled. Her stomach lurched, but the surge of survival was stronger. Dorian dispatched the last attacker with a brutal swipe, his claws raking deep. The cabin was suddenly still, save for their breathing. His hybrid form eased away, muscles and claws retracting until he stood before her once more as a man, chest heaving. His eyes found hers, and in them was something raw, pride, maybe, or relief. "You didn't hesitate," he said. "You told me not to." A faint, dangerous smile curved his mouth. "And you listened." Section 11. The Path No Wolf Walks. The cabin stank of blood and smoke. Dorian stood still for a moment, listening, not to the silence inside, but to the forest beyond. His head tilted slightly and his eyes narrowed. "They'll smell this from miles away," he said at last. "We have minutes before more arrive." Lila wiped the blade on a scrap of linen, her hands trembling now that the adrenaline ebbed. "Where do we go?" "Somewhere they won't follow," he replied, already pulling on his tattered coat. "Pack what you can carry in one hand." She stuffed the bare essentials into her satchel, glancing once at the bodies sprawled across the floor. "And if they do follow?" Dorian's gaze flicked to her, a flash of crimson brightening the gold in his eyes. "They won't. Not where we're going." Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving the forest eerily still. Moonlight silvered the world, painting the pines in ghostlight. He set a swift pace, weaving between trunks with uncanny precision, every footfall silent. Lila kept up as best she could, her breath clouding in the frigid air. "Where exactly is this place?" she asked between breaths. "A ravine east of here. Deep enough to swallow sound, old enough that even wolves fear it." She almost laughed. "And we're walking toward it?" "You're walking toward it," he corrected. "I'll carry you down." The trees thinned, and the ground began to slope sharply. Before she could protest, Dorian swept her into his arms again, his movements smooth as water. The descent was dizzying. She caught flashes of jagged rock and frozen waterfalls, the wind funneling upward like a ghost's howl. Somewhere below, a faint glow pulsed in the darkness, greenish and strange. When his boots touched solid ground, she saw it fully, a cavern mouth yawning open in the cliffside, its edges etched with patterns too precise to be natural. "What is this place?" she whispered. Dorian set her down but kept a hand on her shoulder. "A crossing point. Older than both my bloodlines. And dangerous for reasons I can't yet explain." She turned to him. "Then why bring me here?" His expression was unreadable, but his voice was certain. "Because if I don't, you'll die before dawn." Section 12. The Hollow Between Worlds. The cavern mouth swallowed the moonlight as they stepped inside, trading silver glow for green shadows. Lila felt the air change immediately, cooler, denser, with a faint hum that seemed to seep into her bones. The walls were slick with mineral sheen, carved in sweeping arcs that formed symbols she didn't recognize. Her fingertips tingled when she brushed one. "These marks, they feel alive." "They are," Dorian said quietly, his voice echoing faintly in the vast space. "This place was made by something that walked the earth long before vampires or wolves learned to hate each other." His boots made no sound on the stone, but Lila's steps echoed like small ripples in a still pond. The glow deepened as they moved farther in, until the walls themselves seemed to breathe with it. "What is it?" she asked, glancing around. "Old magic," he replied. "A sanctuary and a snare. Those who don't belong can't pass through without being altered." "Altered how?" He didn't answer immediately, and she caught the way his jaw tightened. "Some are broken. Others, changed into something they can't name." They reached a wide chamber where the light pooled brighter, reflecting off a still, black surface in the center water, though it seemed too dark to be natural. Lila stepped toward it, but Dorian's hand caught her wrist. "Not yet." His grip was firm, but not painful. "This water is the threshold. Once you touch it, the place sees you. It decides." Her heart thudded. "And you've crossed it before?" "Once," he said, his voice lower now, almost reverent. "I came out with blood that burned hotter. Stronger senses. A hunger I couldn't name. And you think it will help us?" "I think," Dorian said, releasing her wrists slowly, "that it will keep them from finding you. And, maybe, keep you from dying the next time we're cornered." The hum in the air grew stronger, pressing against her skin like a pulse. She realized then that part of her wanted to step forward, not out of courage, but because something in that dark water was calling her by name. Section 13. The First Test. The black water lay perfectly still, reflecting the green glow from the cavern walls. Lila stood at its edge, her breath shallow. Every instinct told her to step back, but the pull beneath her sternum grew stronger with each heartbeat. Dorian watched her closely, arms crossed over his chest. In the dim light, his eyes gleamed more crimson than gold. "It's not a choice you can undo," he said. "Once you're marked, the cavern remembers you." "What happens if I don't?" she asked. "Then you'll be running for the rest of your life," he replied. His tone wasn't cruel, just honest, stripped of anything soft. She stared into the water again. The surface didn't show her reflection. Instead, it rippled faintly, shapes flickering beneath. Shadows that seemed to mimic her own movements with a delay, like they were learning her before becoming her. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "And if I go in?" Dorian stepped closer, his presence a heat in the cool air. "If you go in, it will take something from you. I can't tell you what. I lost part of my humanity here. You might lose something else." Lila thought of the wolves tearing into her apothecary, of Dorian's blood on her floor, of the moment she'd driven the knife into her attacker without hesitation. The truth was simple. She had already lost the life she'd known. "I'm not the same woman I was 2 days ago," she said. "And I'm not going to survive this as I am now." For the first time, his expression softened into something like pride. "Then step forward." The moment her boot touched the water, the hum in the air surged into a deep, resonant chord. Cold licked up her leg, but it wasn't the chill of winter. It was something older, like the memory of ice that had never melted. The surface broke open, and a rush of images flooded her mind, herself running under a silver moon, her hands stronger, her senses sharpened, her heart beating in time with something not entirely human. She gasped, stumbling, but Dorian's hands caught her shoulders. "Breathe," he said, voice low. "It's just the first test." From the far side of the pool, something rose, a figure shaped like a woman, but made of liquid shadow, its eyes twin points of green fire. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere at once. "Name what you will give, and the cavern will grant what you seek." Section 14. The Price of Passage. The shadow woman's gaze fixed on Lila, those burning green eyes unblinking. The air thickened, pressing in on her lungs until each breath felt earned. "What does it mean?" she whispered to Dorian without looking away from the figure. "It means the cavern won't let you take its power for free," he said, his voice steady but low. "You have to name the part of yourself you're willing to lose." Lila's stomach tightened. "And if I don't? Then it chooses for you." His tone held a weight that made her think he'd seen that happen before. The shadow woman took a step forward, though her feet never broke the surface of the water. "Speak." Lila's mind reeled. What could she give up and still remain herself? Her skills as a healer? No, those were too much a part of her. Her memories? She'd be lost without them. Dorian's hand brushed her shoulder. "Think carefully. It will twist vague answers. Be exact." She thought of the life she'd left behind, the lonely rooms above the apothecary, the small conversations that never led anywhere, the quiet ache she'd never dared to name. "I'll give my fear," she said finally, her voice trembling but sure. "The kind that keeps me from moving forward. The kind that makes me choose safety over what's right." The figure tilted its head, as if weighing the answer. "Fear is a root. Without it, some grow strong. Others, reckless. I'll take my chances." The water surged upward without warning, swallowing her to the knees, then the waist. It was cold, but not in a way that made her shiver. It burned, numbing and searing all at once. Something deep inside her seemed to loosen, as if an invisible chain had been slipped free. When the water stilled again, she stood gasping, her pulse hammering not from terror but from exhilaration. The shadow woman's voice was softer now. "Then rise unbound." The figure dissolved into ripples, the green glow in its eyes fading into the cavern walls. Dorian stepped closer, studying her. "Your eyes," he murmured. "They've changed." She blinked. "Changed how?" "Brighter. Wilder." His mouth curved, almost a smile. You're not just human anymore. Section 15, The First Shift. The cavern's hum faded to a faint throb as Lila stepped out of the black water. Every inch of her skin felt alive, her heartbeat thrumming in her fingertips, her teeth aching as if they were subtly changing shape. Dorian moved beside her, his presence steady but alert. Don't fight it, he said. The cavern's power settles differently in everyone. It will feel strange until it knows where to rest. They walked toward the entrance, the green glow dimming behind them. With each step, Lila noticed new details, the way the stone walls smelled faintly of copper and moss, the near-silent flutter of a bat far above them, the pulse of Dorian's heartbeat without having to touch him. When they emerged into the night air, the world looked sharper. Every snowflake caught the moonlight like a shard of glass, every shadow seemed to carry texture. She paused, lifting her face to the cold breeze. I can smell them, she murmured before realizing what she'd said. Dorian's gaze sharpened. Where? She tilted her head, listening to something beyond sound. Northwest. 2, no, 3 of them. Close enough that we don't have much time. His lips parted in something halfway between admiration and concern. You're tracking them already. No, she said, pulse quickening not from fear, but from the raw thrill of it. Dorian stepped closer, his voice lower. This is why they'd kill you if they knew. You're becoming what they fear most, someone who can match them without their weaknesses. Before she could answer, a distant howl cut through the night. It should have chilled her. Instead, something deep in her chest answered a low, instinctive hum she didn't realize had slipped from her throat until Dorian's eyes went wide. You're feeling the call, he said quietly. What call? He studied her like she was something precious and dangerous all at once. The bond between predator and pack. And it's already reaching for you. Section 16, Lessons in the Dark. Dorian led her away from the cavern, deeper into the forest where the moonlight sifted through tall pines. The snow here was untouched, muffling their steps, though Lila could hear every shift of his boots against the ground as if her senses were tuned to him. We don't have time for slow learning, he said, glancing over his shoulder. If you can hear them, smell them, feel their presence, that means they can feel yours. You need to mask it. Mask it how? She asked. He stopped abruptly, turning to face her. Instinct will make you want to track, to answer when they call. You fight that with focus. Shut them out. Picture walls between your mind and theirs. Lila frowned. And if the walls crack? Then you become the hunter before they do, he said simply. He stepped closer until she could see the faint pattern of veins along his temples, faintly pulsing with that strange silver and crimson shimmer. Close your eyes, he murmured. She obeyed. The forest sounds sharpened. The whisper of wind through needles, the faint creak of ice on branches. But beneath it all was that low, magnetic hum from the northwest. Now build it, Dorian said. Stone, fire, steel, it doesn't matter. Create something they can't pass through. She pictured a wall of black stone rising from the forest floor, higher and thicker with each heartbeat. The pull from the pack's direction grew fainter, until it was gone. Her eyes snapped open. It worked. Dorian's expression softened with something almost like pride. Good. But that's only half the lesson. What's the other half? A faint smile touched his lips, but there was no warmth in it, only the glint of a predator testing another. Finding them before they find you. Before she could respond, he turned, vanishing into the trees without a sound. For a moment she thought she'd lost him, until her new senses caught the faint trace of his scent, pine, iron, and something darker, uniquely his. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't just a lesson. This was a hunt. Section 17, The Hunt in Moonlight. The forest seemed to hold its breath as Lila stepped forward, every sound amplified by her new awareness. Snow shifted under her boots with a faint crunch, and she winced too loud. She adjusted her weight, placing each foot as Dorian had moved earlier, heel to toe, slow, deliberate. His scent hung faintly in the air, pine and shadow, and she followed it like a thread. At first it was easy, the trail strong. But then it split, veering in 2 directions. A trick. She crouched, brushing her fingers over the snow where the prints divided. One set was deeper, deliberate, heavy enough to be misleading. The other, lighter, almost ghost-like. She smiled to herself. Clever. Choosing the lighter path, she moved between the pines, her breath steady, heart quick. The moonlight painted every branch in silver, every shadow in sharp relief. Somewhere ahead, she caught the faintest sound, a shift of fabric, too controlled to be an animal. He was close. She slowed, pressing herself against a wide trunk, peering around it. The clearing beyond looked empty, until her eyes adjusted to the darker shapes within the darkness. Dorian stood on the far side, still as carved stone, his back partially turned. Lila's instincts whispered to move in, to close the distance before he realized she was there. She eased forward, step by careful step, the scent of him growing stronger. Her grip on the knife tightened, not because she planned to use it, but because the weight grounded her. When she was within arm's reach, she lunged only to find herself caught mid-motion, her wrist trapped in his hand. "You're quieter than I expected," he said, his eyes glinting in the moonlight. "But your breathing gave you away." Lila's lips curved. "And if I'd had another second?" His smile was a flash of white against the dark. "Then you might have had me." Their gazes locked, the space between them taut as a bowstring. He didn't let go immediately, his grip firm but not hurting, his thumb brushing the inside of her wrist in a way that felt intentional. Before she could speak, the wind shifted. Both of them turned their heads at once. The scent was sharp, feral, unfamiliar. Not Dorian's. Not hers. 3 of them, he said. Moving fast. Section 18. The Making of a Predator. Dorian's hand released her wrist, but his voice stayed close, low. "We don't run this time." Lila's pulse thudded, not with fear, but with a sharp thrill of readiness. "What do we do?" "We turn the hunt on them." He glanced at her, eyes catching the moonlight like molten gold. "You've already masked your presence. Now you use it." They moved together, slipping between the pines, circling wide. Lila followed his pace, keeping her breathing shallow, each footfall silent on the crusted snow. She could feel the 3 shapes closing in, one ahead, 2 flanking, unaware that their prey was no longer fleeing. Dorian stopped behind a fallen spruce, crouching low. "The first one will come through that gap," he whispered, pointing toward a break in the trees where the snow was thinnest. "They'll think it's the easiest path. And when they do, you strike first. Fast. Don't let them recover." Her fingers curled around the hilt of her knife, the weight familiar now, almost comforting. She positioned herself beside the gap, heart steady, senses tuned to the approaching rhythm of paw against snow. The first wolf burst through the break, a hulking shape of black fur and ice-sharp eyes. Lila didn't think. She drove the knife up under its jaw, the silvered edge sliding between bone. Hot blood splashed her hand as the creature collapsed, its momentum carrying it into the snow. No time to hesitate. The second came from the left, shifting mid-leap into a snarling man with claws like hooked glass. Lila ducked low, letting his swipe catch only air, then slashed across his thigh. He roared, staggering, but before he could recover, Dorian was there, his hybrid form a blur of muscle and fang, taking the attacker down in a single crushing blow. The third wolf froze at the sight of its fallen packmates, then bolted into the trees. Lila straightened, chest rising and falling, the night air cold on her blood-wet hands. She should have been shaking, but her body hummed with something fierce and alive. Dorian's eyes found hers. "You're not prey anymore," he said, voice half growl, half pride. For the first time, she believed him. Section 19. The Scent of the Alpha. The forest fell silent again, save for the faint rustle of the escaping wolf. Lila could hear its heartbeat. Fast, panicked, threading through the trees ahead. She met Dorian's gaze. "We can catch it." His lips curved in something between approval and warning. "We will. But we don't kill it yet." "Why not?" she asked, already falling into step beside him. "Because that one will run home to its alpha. And I want to know which alpha thinks they're brave enough to hunt me in my own territory." They moved swiftly, shadows among shadows. Lila felt the wolf's trail like a hot line in her blood, the musk of its fur, the sharp tang of fierce sweat, the faint iron of blood from a torn paw. Her senses sharpened as they closed in. The moon cast long spears of light between the pines, glinting off frost. She felt every shift of the ground beneath her boots, every faint tremor in the air as the wolf crashed through underbrush ahead. Then it veered suddenly, angling toward a rocky outcrop. Lila narrowed her eyes. It's heading for higher ground. Dorian's voice was low, predatory. That means the alpha's waiting there. They slowed, moving quieter now. The scent of the wolf grew stronger, mingled now with something heavier, more potent. Even before she saw them, Lila knew the alpha was close. They crested the rise, crouching behind a stand of frost-laden firs. In the clearing beyond, the surviving wolf shifted into a man, dropping to one knee before a towering figure draped in a coat of black fur. His hair was silvered, his frame massive, and when he looked up, his eyes caught the moonlight in a flash of pale blue that made Lila's breath hitch. "That's him," Dorian murmured. "Arden. One of the oldest alphas still walking. And the one I never wanted to see again." The wolf who'd fled spoke hurriedly in a guttural language Lila didn't know, but the alpha's gaze swept the tree-line, searching. She felt the weight of that look even from this distance, as though those eyes could peel back the forest and find her heartbeat in the dark. Dorian's hand closed lightly on her arm. "We leave. Now. Before he catches our scent." But even as he spoke, Arden's head tilted slightly, his nostrils flaring. A slow, knowing smile spread across his face. Section 20. The Alpha's Move. The slow curl of Arden's smile was worse than a snarl. It was the look of someone who knew the trap had already been sprung. "Too late," Dorian muttered. The Alpha straightened, his massive frame cutting a silhouette against the snow-bright clearing. He raised one hand in a casual gesture, and from the trees behind him, 5 more wolves emerged silent, disciplined, their eyes glinting with the same icy light. Lila's instincts screamed to mask her presence, to sink behind those mental walls, but something told her Arden could smell through anything. The Alpha's voice carried easily across the clearing, deep and resonant. "Half-breed," he called. "You've been running too long." Dorian's growl was low and lethal. "I stopped running the moment you stepped into my forest." Arden's pale gaze shifted, landing on Lila. "And you found yourself a little shadow to follow you. Tell me, does she even know what you are to us?" "She knows enough," Dorian snapped, stepping slightly in front of her. The Alpha chuckled, a sound with no humor. "Good. Then she can hear the terms from my mouth. Come with me now, surrender your claim to the old blood, and I'll let the girl live." Lila felt the tension in Dorian's stance. "And if I don't?" he asked. "Then I take her first," Arden said simply, as though stating the weather. The air between them sharpened. Dorian shifted subtly, his hand brushing Lila's wrist. It wasn't just contact, it was a silent message. "Be ready." Arden's wolves began to fan out, moving with the eerie precision of trained killers. Lila counted their steps, marking the distance. Her pulse was steady now, every muscle ready to move. Without warning, Dorian dropped into his hybrid form. Moonlight catching on the sweep of his claws, the powerful curve of muscle beneath his skin. The sudden violence in his change made the wolves hesitate, their disciplined lines faltering. "That's your answer," Dorian growled. Arden's smile vanished. "Then this is your death." Section 21. Teeth and blood in the snow. The clearing exploded into chaos. Arden's wolves lunged first, blurs of muscle and claw, snow spraying into the air as they closed the distance. Dorian met the first head-on, his hybrid form slamming into the attacker with bone-snapping force. The impact threw the wolf into the tree-line, leaving a dark smear on the snow. 2 more circled toward Lila. Her knife was already in her hand, silver edge catching the moonlight. She dropped into a crouch, just as Dorian had taught her, letting instinct and new senses guide her. The first came low, aiming to knock her off her feet. She pivoted, driving the blade into its flank and feeling the vibration through her arm as it yelped, twisting away. The second came in harder, too fast to dodge entirely, but she rolled with the hit, letting it shove her into the snow instead of tearing into her. As it turned for the kill, she came up in a fluid motion, knife flashing across its throat. Dorian caught sight of her and snarled, not in anger, but in that strange, fierce pride she was beginning to recognize. Then he was gone again, tearing through another wolf with devastating efficiency. Arden hadn't moved. He stood at the far end of the clearing, watching, his pale eyes unreadable. Lila realized then that he wasn't interested in the outcome of this fight. He was studying her. The moment the thought hit, one of the wolves broke from the melee and charged her blind side. She heard its pause a split second before impact, and without thinking, she spun, her knife hand low and her other arm bracing. The blade sank deep into its chest, straight to the heart. The wolf convulsed and collapsed, blood steaming in the cold. The last of the pack faltered, sensing the tide had turned. Dorian dispatched it in a blur, snow settling behind him like a curtain. Silence fell except for the hiss of their breathing. Lila's pulse roared in her ears. Arden finally stepped forward, his boots crunching on the snow. "Interesting," he said, his gaze fixed on her. "The cavern has touched you." Dorian stepped between them, his body tense. "You won't touch her." The alpha's smile returned, slow and deliberate. "Oh, I will. But not tonight." He turned without another word, vanishing into the tree-line, the surviving wolves melting after him like smoke. Section 22, Old Wounds, New Prey. The forest swallowed the sound of Arden's retreat, leaving only the soft drift of falling snow. Dorian stayed still for a moment, eyes fixed on the tree-line, his hybrid form slowly retracting. The sharp edges of claw and fang gave way to human lines, though the tension in his posture didn't ease. Lila wiped her blade on the snow, her breath still ragged. "You're not going after him?" "No," his voice was low-controlled. "Not on his terms. He wanted me to follow." She frowned, stepping closer. "What is he to you?" Dorian's gaze flicked to hers, and for the first time since she'd met him, there was a hesitation, a flicker of something almost vulnerable. "We were pack once. Before I became what I am." Lila stilled. "You knew him before you were a hybrid?" "Yes," he said, the word a bitter exhale. "He was my alpha. My mentor. The one who taught me to fight to lead. And the first to try to kill me when my blood changed." Her stomach tightened. "So this isn't just a hunt. It's personal." Dorian's jaw clenched. "To him, I'm a stain on his name. To me, he's a reminder of what I'll never be: trusted, accepted, safe. But now..." He glanced toward the spot where Arden had watched her with those cold eyes. "Now he's shifted his focus." "You mean me?" "Yes." His voice darkened. "He's seen the cavern's mark on you. And Arden has always coveted what he doesn't understand." Lila's grip tightened on the knife. "Then we stop him before he decides to take me." Dorian studied her, something unreadable in his gaze. "You speak as if you're ready for a war you don't yet understand." "I'm ready for anything that means not going back to being prey." A slow, dangerous smile touched his lips. "Good. Because if Arden comes again, it won't be with scouts. It will be with his entire pack. And we'll be ready," she said. Dorian's eyes gleamed in the moonlight, a spark of approval mingled with something far more dangerous. "We will." Section 23, Steel, Shadow, and Teeth. They left the clearing before the scent of blood could draw scavengers. Dorian led her through a winding path along the ridgeline, moving with the quiet assurance of someone who knew every root and hollow. By dawn, they reached a rocky alcove shielded on three sides by sheer cliff. A frozen stream cut along its edge, the water whispering beneath the ice. "This will do," Dorian said, scanning the terrain. "High ground. One way in. Easy to defend." Lila dropped her satchel onto the snow. "You've used this place before." His mouth twitched. "Once or twice. Not for a war, though." They started work immediately. Dorian scavenged long, sturdy branches and sharpened them into jagged stakes, setting them into the ground at the alcove's entrance. Lila sorted through her supplies, pulling out jars of oil, lengths of cloth, and the bitter-smelling herbs she used for numbing salves. "Poison won't kill them," Dorian said when he saw the herbs, but it will slow them. Make their limbs heavy, their reflexes dull. Then I'll make enough to coat every blade we have. She glanced at him. Speaking of which, how many do we have? 3 knives, 1 short sword, and my claws, he said without hesitation. Then, almost as an afterthought, and your teeth, if you're willing. She blinked at him. You're changing, Lila. Slowly, yes, but you've already felt it. The urge to bite when you're close enough. The strength in your jaw when you do. She thought of the way she'd sunk the knife into the wolf's throat, how her body had moved without hesitation. She swallowed. If it comes to that, I won't hold back. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned with approval. Good. You'll need to be faster than you were tonight. And you'll need to trust me completely. I already do, she said. Something in his stance shifted at that, barely perceptible, but enough for her to notice. He looked away first, busying himself with wedging a stake into the frozen ground. By nightfall, the alcove had been transformed into a kill zone. Traps lay hidden under the snow, narrow paths channeled attackers toward the stakes, and every weapon was coated in the thick, oily sheen of her numbing mixture. Dorian stood at the entrance, surveying their work. It's good, he said. But it won't be enough if Arden comes himself. Then what will? She asked. He turned to her, the fading light catching on the sharp line of his cheekbone, the faint glint of fong behind his lips. Me. Unbound. Section 24, Unbound. The word hung in the cold air between them, sharp as a blade. Lila crossed her arms. You're going to have to explain that. Dorian didn't look at her at first. He crouched by the frozen stream, running his hand over the glassy surface as if tracing some invisible map. There's a reason hybrids like me are rare. We're stronger, yes, but we're unstable. Both bloodlines fight for control. If I let go, if I unbind myself, there's no telling which side wins. Her brow furrowed. You mean you lose control? He glanced up, and in the dim light his eyes were more crimson than gold. Completely. The hunger takes over. Every instinct becomes sharper, more ruthless. I could tear through Arden's entire pack, or I could tear through anything that moves, whether it's a wolf, a tree, or... He stopped himself. Or me, she finished quietly. The silence between them was thick, broken only by the faint whisper of water beneath ice. That's why I've never done it since I left him, Dorian said at last. When you're unbound, there's no reasoning. No restraint. It's pure instinct until your body burns itself out. And what happens then? You collapse. Or you don't wake up at all. Lila studied him, the weight of the choice settling in her chest. So it's a weapon that could kill you and me if it goes wrong. Yes. Then we don't use it unless there's no other choice, she said firmly. His gaze softened, though there was still a shadow behind it. I'd rather it never came to that. But if Arden forces my hand, then I'll be ready, she interrupted. A ghost of a smile curved his lips. You've gotten bolder in 2 days. Maybe, she said, a hint of a grin in return. Or maybe the cavern took more of my fear than I realized. He stepped closer, close enough that his breath warmed the winter air between them. If it did, Lila, you might be more dangerous than I am. Before she could answer, the wind shifted, carrying a faint, all too familiar scent, wet fur, cold steel, and the tang of blood. They're close, Dorian murmured. His expression changed, all softness gone, replaced by the sharp focus of a predator about to fight for everything. Section 25. The first wave. The scent thickened, rolling over the ridgeline like a storm. Lila could almost count them by the heartbeat, 7, maybe 8 shapes moving through the trees. Not close enough to strike yet, but coming. Dorian's posture shifted into a low, coiled readiness. They're scouts. Testing us before the main strike. Then we show them the wrong place to be, Lila said, sliding the silvered knife into her belt. He gave her a quick, feral grin. That's the spirit. They took their positions. Lila crouched near the narrowest point of the entrance, where the stakes were half buried beneath snow. Dorian melted into the shadows along the cliff wall, the faint glint of his eyes the only sign he was there. The forest went still, so quiet that the creak of ice on a branch sounded like a crack of thunder. Then came the first wolf, massive, gray-furred, moving low and slow. It paused just beyond the stakes, nostrils flaring. Lila didn't move. The second wolf slipped in from the side, followed by a third, both keeping low. Their formation was deliberate, Arden's training. The first shifted into a man with lean, corded muscle and pale scars tracing his chest. His eyes swept the alcove entrance, lingering on the sharpened stakes. "He's here," the man growled to the others. "And he's not alone." Lila's grip tightened on her knife. Dorian's voice echoed softly in her head from their earlier training. "Wait for the moment when they think they're safe." The man stepped forward, testing the ground between the stakes. The snow gave way beneath his weight, dropping him into the hidden pit lined with sharpened branches. His scream split the air. The other two wolves lunged toward him in a rush straight into Dorian. He came out of the shadows like a blade, claws raking across one wolf's spine in a spray of blood. The second tried to turn, but Lila was already there, driving her knife into its side, twisting hard before pulling free. The wolf crumpled, gasping, its movements sluggish from her numbing poison. Dorian finished it with a clean slash to the throat. The man in the pit was still alive, writhing, cursing them in that guttural wolf tongue. Dorian crouched at the edge, eyes cold. "Tell Arden the next wave dies faster." He yanked one of the stakes free and drove it down, ending the man's cries. The forest was silent again, but only for a moment. Then, faint but unmistakable, came another howl. It wasn't a warning. It was a signal. Section 26, The Main Assault. The answering howls rolled through the forest, layered and deep, too many to count this time. The sound made the snow under Lila's boots seem thinner, the air itself tense. Dorian's eyes narrowed. "That's the pack. Full force." "How many?" she asked, already tightening her grip on her knife. "Enough to make the ground red," he said, his voice a calm that was somehow more dangerous than shouting. They took their positions again. Dorian crouched low at the far side of the entrance, muscles taut. Lila kept to her place near the inner stakes, where the choke point was narrowest. The traps were reset, the oil from her numbing mixture glistening faintly on their weapons. The forest silence broke all at once. Shadows poured between the trees, each one a wolf or something worse, their eyes catching the moonlight in shades of ice and flame. They came fast, Arden's discipline holding them in tight formation until they reached the choke point. The first rank hit the traps. Stakes punched through fur and flesh, wolves howling as the snow turned dark beneath them. The ones behind leapt over their fallen kin, charging straight for Lila. Her body moved before thought. Ducking under a swipe, slashing across a belly, pivoting to drive her blade into a throat. Blood sprayed hot across her arm, but she didn't flinch. The poison worked quickly. Those she struck slowed within seconds, their movements heavy and clumsy. Dorian tore through the left flank in a blur of claws and teeth, his hybrid form a force of pure violence. One wolf tried to grapple him from behind. He caught it by the scruff and slammed it into the cliff wall hard enough to shatter stone. A massive white-furred wolf shouldered through the melee, scattering its pack mates. Its eyes locked on Lila, cold and intelligent. She recognized this one. She'd seen it in the tree-lean days before, watching her. It lunged. She sidestepped, but it was faster than anything she'd fought yet. Its teeth grazed her shoulder before she brought her knife up in a sharp, upward thrust. The blade sank deep into its jawline, and it howled, snapping back. Before it could recover, Dorian was there, driving his claws into its ribs and yanking it down. The white wolf twitched once and went still. The ground was slick now, blood steaming in the cold. The air reeked of iron and fur. Lila's chest heaved, but her stance was steady. "Is that all of them?" Dorian's eyes lifted past her, scanning the tree-lean. His expression told her the answer before he spoke. "No," he said, his voice low. "He's here." Section 27, The Alpha Enters. The snow-meated forest seemed to lean in as a shadow detached itself from the tree-lean. Arden stepped into the clearing, not rushing, not snarling, just moving with the slow, deliberate confidence of something that knew nothing could touch it. His coat of black fur hung heavy over his broad shoulders, dusted with frost. The pale blue of his eyes burned against the darkness, fixed on Dorian with a weight that seemed to press the air between them flat. Around them, the surviving wolves went still, forming a wide half-circle. None moved forward. None needed to. "Half-breed," Arden said, his deep voice carrying without effort. "Still guarding the weak as if it will make you strong." Dorian stepped forward, shoulders squared. "Still hiding behind numbers as if they'll make you alpha." Arden's mouth curved faintly, though the expression never reached his eyes. "I don't need numbers for you. And I don't need them for her." His gaze shifted to Lila, lingering like a knife point. "The cavern touched you. I can smell it in your blood." Lila didn't flinch, though every instinct told her to mask her scent. "You want it," she said, her voice steady. "I want to see if it can survive in a real alpha," Arden replied. Dorian's growl was low and dangerous. "You'll have to live long enough to try." Arden let the fur cloak fall from his shoulders. Beneath, his body rippled with the first signs of change. Skin hardening, muscles swelling, claws sliding from his hands. The shift was slower than Dorian's, but deliberate, each moment a statement. "I have the time to kill you." The pressure in the clearing built. Lila felt it in her chest, the pull toward Dorian and the echo of something wild beneath her own skin answering Arden's dominance challenge. Dorian's voice was tight when he spoke to her without looking away from Arden. "Stay back." "I can fight," she said. "This isn't a fight you join," he growled. "If I lose control." "Then you trust me to bring you back," she cut in. His eyes flicked to her for just a second, gold and crimson clashing, before snapping back to Arden. The alpha finished his transformation, towering, his white-silver mane bristling, fangs bared in a slow, deliberate grin. "Come, Dorian," he said. "Show me what the Unbound looks like." Section 28, The Edge of the Unbound. The air between them vibrated with tension, each heartbeat a drumbeat toward violence. Dorian's hybrid form surged forward in a blur, claws slicing through the space Arden had occupied an instant before. The alpha moved with uncanny grace for his size, pivoting to slam a massive shoulder into Dorian's ribs. The impact sent him skidding across the blood-slick snow. Lila felt it immediately, Dorian's presence shifting, becoming something heavier, darker. His breathing was faster, deeper, his movements sharper in ways that weren't just skill, they were instinct tearing at the leash. Arden sensed it too. "Yes," he rumbled. "Let it take you." Dorian lunged again, this time catching Arden's forearm and raking deep furrows into his flesh. The alpha didn't cry out, he laughed, a low, chilling sound that echoed through the clearing. The surviving wolves backed farther away. Even they knew what it meant when a hybrid was on the edge of going unbound. Lila's senses screamed at her. Every fiber of her being told her to move, to strike, to do something before Dorian crossed that invisible line. But her feet stayed rooted, her knife tight in her grip, her mind working faster than her breath. She'd seen flashes of what he could do before. If he fully unbound, he could tear Arden apart. But she'd also seen the look in his eyes when he'd warned her, if there was nothing to anchor him, he could just as easily tear her apart too. Dorian slammed Arden to the ground, snow exploding around them, claws digging for the alpha's throat. Arden caught his wrists, their strength almost matched, their snarls blending into a single sound that was more beast than human. "Dorian." Lila's voice cut through the chaos. For a fraction of a second, his head turned toward her. It was a mistake. Arden drove a knee up into Dorian's side, forcing him back and rolling them apart. The alpha's grin widened, blood trailing from the corner of his mouth. "She's your tether," he said, taunting. "All I have to do is cut the string." Lila's blood went cold. Section 29, Cutting the String. Arden moved with terrifying speed for his size, breaking from Dorian's reach and charging straight toward Lila. His claws caught the moonlight, each step cracking the ice beneath his feet. Lila sidestepped his first swipe, feeling the wind of it tear strands of hair from her braid. She slashed low, aiming for his thigh, but he pivoted with inhuman precision, catching her wrist mid-strike. His grip was like iron, forcing her knife hand up until the blade hovered just below her own chin. Such sharpness, Arden said, voice low, almost intimate. The cavern has made you more than prey. But you're still not enough. Before he could finish, a blur of crimson and gold hit him from the side. Dorian's claws tore Arden's grip away from her, sending the alpha stumbling back a few paces. Dorian's face was different now, too different. His fangs were longer, his eyes molten, his breathing ragged as if every inhale pulled him deeper into something wild and dangerous. "Stay back, Lila." His voice was a snarl, barely human. But Arden laughed, wiping blood from his jaw. "There it is. The Unbound. Come then, show me." Dorian launched himself forward with a speed that seemed to warp the air, colliding with Arden so hard the impact echoed off the cliffs. The fight became a blur of claws, fangs, and blood, neither of them holding back. Snow churned into mud beneath their feet, the air filled with snarls and the crack of bone against bone. Lila's heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the pull in her blood. She could feel Dorian's rage like heat under her skin, the connection between them stretched taut and trembling. She realized with sudden clarity that if he broke that tether completely, she wouldn't just lose him, she'd be standing in front of something she'd have no choice but to kill. Dorian pinned Arden against the cliff wall, claws digging deep. "You don't touch her," he growled, but the words were so distorted by the beast in him that they almost didn't sound like language at all. Arden grinned through the blood in his teeth. "Soon, you won't even know who she is." And for the first time, Lila saw it, the flicker of confusion in Dorian's eyes, like her face was already slipping away from him. Section 30, The Anchor. The flicker in Dorian's eyes was brief, but it was enough to make Lila's blood run cold. If she waited any longer, she'd lose him entirely to the Unbound. She didn't think she moved. "Dorian." Her voice rang through the clearing, sharp as a blade, but he didn't turn. His claws dug deeper into Arden's chest, hot blood steaming in the cold. She ran straight toward them, ignoring every instinct screaming at her to keep her distance. Her boots slipped in the churned snow, but she pushed harder until she was close enough to feel the heat of their bodies. "Look at me," she shouted, reaching up to grab his face. Her fingers pressed into the sides of his jaw, forcing his molten eyes toward hers. Arden tried to twist away, sensing the shift, but Dorian's grip tightened reflexively on him. His gaze wavered, unfocused, wild, but she held on. "It's me," she said, her voice low now, steady despite her racing heart. "Not prey. Not a threat. Me." His breathing hitched, claws twitching as if deciding whether to strike or let go. The gold in his eyes surged, fighting with the crimson, the war between his two halves visible in the tightening of his jaw. "You came for me in the apothecary," she continued, her words tumbling out fast, desperate. "You carried me into the snow. You took me to the cavern. You taught me how to hunt. That's you, Dorian, not this." Arden snarled, trying to break the moment, but she didn't spare him a glance. Her entire focus was locked on the man inside the monster. Something cracked not in the air, but in Dorian. The tension in his body shifted, his claws loosening from Arden's flesh. The crimson in his eyes dimmed, gold burning brighter. Arden saw it too. His lips pulled back in a snarl. "Pathetic. You let her chain you." Before he could twist free, Dorian's claws shot forward again, not with the wild, unfocused fury from before, but with precision. He drove them into Arden's shoulder, forcing the alpha back a step. "I'm not chained," Dorian growled, voice clear now. "I'm choosing." Section 31, The Chosen Strike. Arden's snarl deepened, his muscles bunching to break free, but Dorian didn't give him the chance. He pivoted sharply, twisting the alpha's trapped arm and forcing him to stagger sideways into the cliff wall. Snow and shards of ice cascaded down from above. This time, there was no wild frenzy in Dorian's movements. Each strike was calculated, brutal in its precision. His claws carved into Arden's ribs, forcing him to guard low, only for Dorian to snap his fangs toward the alpha's throat. Arden blocked, but barely, the force of it driving him back into the churned snow. "You've gotten slower," Dorian taunted, circling. His voice was steady now, almost calm. Arden's pale eyes narrowed. And you've gotten weaker. A true alpha doesn't need a leash to keep his teeth in check. Maybe not, Dorian said, feinting left before darting right, slashing deep into Arden's side. But you've spent so long proving you're a predator that you've forgotten how to think like one. Blood darkened the snow at Arden's feet. He lunged suddenly, his bulk crashing into Dorian, and for a moment it was nothing but claws and muscles straining against each other. Dorian rolled with the momentum, hooking one leg behind Arden's to send him crashing to the ground. Lila moved toward them on instinct, but Dorian's voice snapped out, commanding, "Stay back." It wasn't fear in his tone, it was focus. He wasn't keeping her out of the fight. He was keeping her out of his way. Arden kicked out, forcing Dorian to step back, but the damage was showing. His movements were slower, his breaths heavier. The precision of Dorian's strikes had chipped away at the alpha's endurance. "You can't win this," Arden growled, straightening. "I already have," Dorian replied. Then he moved, a single, decisive motion. His claws hooked Arden's arm, twisting it just enough to drop the alpha to one knee. His other hand drove up beneath Arden's jaw, claws piercing clean through. The sound was wet, final. The alpha's pale eyes widened, then dimmed as his weight sagged. Dorian let him fall into the snow, the steam of his last breath curling into the cold night. Around them, the surviving wolves hesitated, the bond to their alpha shattering. Without a leader's call, they melted into the tree-lean, silent as ghosts. Dorian turned to Lila, his chest heaving. The gold in his eyes was steady now, no trace of the crimson frenzy. "It's over." But the faint scent of movement beyond the trees told Lila otherwise. "No," she said quietly. "It's just starting." Section 32, The Weight of an Alpha's Death. The clearing was still thick with the scent of blood and frost. Arden's body lay sprawled where it had fallen, steam curling from the wound in his throat. The silence was heavy, not peace, but the pause before the next storm. Dorian stood over him for a moment longer, his posture neither gloating nor regretful. Then he crouched, closing the alpha's eyes with one hand. "Whatever else he was," he said quietly, "he was my alpha once." Lila stepped closer, her knife still in her grip though the fight was done. "What happens now?" He glanced at her, something sharp and unreadable in his gaze. "When an alpha dies, the pack fractures. Some will challenge for leadership, some will run, and some," his eyes lifted toward the shadowed tree-lean, "will come for the one who killed him. They'll see you as a threat. They'll see me as a replacement," Dorian corrected. "And they'll test me to see if I'm strong enough to take the mantle." Lila felt a ripple of unease. "And if you don't want it? Then I have to make them believe it would cost too much to force it on me." She glanced at the blood-stained snow, then back at him. "You think they'll challenge you here?" "No," he said, straightening. "They'll wait until word spreads. When it does, every alpha within 2 days' run will know Arden's territory is open. They'll come to claim it or to take me down." Lila's grip on her knife tightened. "Then we prepare." A faint smile ghosted across his face. "You're not afraid?" "I gave that up to the Cavern," she reminded him. "And I meant it." Something in his expression softened, just for a heartbeat, before he stepped past her toward the cliff's edge. "We burn the body," he said. "No grave for his followers to rally around. And then we move. Staying here would be asking for a siege." As she followed him to gather wood, Lila realized something unsettling. It wasn't just Arden's death that would draw predators now. It was her. Whatever the Cavern had given her, the wolves could sense it, and sooner or later, someone would want it for themselves. And Dorian, he might have to fight them all to keep it, and her safe. Section 33, Smoke on the Snow. The fire took quickly, the resin-rich pine snapping and spitting as the flames climbed. Arden's body lay at the heart of it, the heat bending the air above until his form blurred into nothing but shadow and flicker. Lila stood beside Dorian, the smoke curling around them and carrying that heavy, iron scent skyward. "Will they smell it?" she asked quietly. "They'll smell it," Dorian said. His gaze was fixed on the blaze, the gold in his eyes reflecting the firelight. "And they'll know exactly what it means. Then we don't have much time." "No," he agreed, "which is why we're heading to neutral ground." Lila frowned. "There's such a thing?" Barely, he said, glancing at her. An old hunting lodge east of here. No alpha claims it, no pack holds it. Wolves go there when they need to talk without tearing each other's throats out. Mostly. Mostly, she echoed, her voice dry. His mouth curved faintly. The rules aren't perfect. They let the fire burn down to embers before moving. The snow was falling harder now, muffling their footsteps as they wound through the pines. Dorian moved ahead with a pace that was quick but measured, his attention constantly sweeping the shadows. Lila matched him, her senses alert for any change in the wind, any faint sound beyond the hush of snowfall. The cavern's gift was sharper now, she could smell the lingering traces of the surviving wolves from earlier, faint but not close. East is dangerous for us, isn't it? She asked after a while. Yes, Dorian admitted. It's closer to the Black Hollow territory. Their alpha isn't fond of hybrids, or outsiders who've killed other alphas. Lila raised a brow. So your plan is to walk into a place where everyone might want us dead and hope the rules hold? Exactly, he said, glancing back with a grin that was all teeth. If they don't, we make them. The wind shifted, bringing with it a faint howl from far behind, a long, low note that spoke not of challenge, but of mourning. Lila felt the sound settle in her bones. They've found out, she murmured. They have, Dorian said, not slowing. And that means we have less than a day before the real predators start to move. Section 34. The Lodge of Thin Peace. By the time the lodge came into view, the snow had dulled into a soft, steady fall. The structure loomed from the tree-line like a relic, heavy timber darkened by age, its roof sagging under years of storms, windows throwing out faint golden light. Lila slowed as they approached, senses prickling. The air here felt different, thicker, layered with scents that didn't quite belong to one species. Wolf, yes, but also something sharper, metallic, and a faint trace of magic like old parchment and candle smoke. Other packs, she asked under her breath. Other creatures, Dorian murmured back. The lodge is neutral because no single kind can dominate it. Everyone's too busy watching their own backs. Inside, the air was warm but tense. A huge fire roared in the stone hearth, casting long shadows over a room crowded with mismatched chairs and heavy tables. Every head turned when they entered. Lila caught glimpses of faces, wolf-sharp eyes, human and not. A pair of pale figures in the far corner whose fangs glinted when they spoke, a broad, scarred man with curling horns protruding from his temples, a woman in a deep green coat whose pupils were slitted like a cat's. Dorian's presence shifted subtly, the way it had before a fight, bigger, more dangerous, without moving a muscle. He kept his gaze forward as they crossed the room to an empty table, but she could feel the eyes tracking their every step. A figure peeled away from the shadows near the fire, a man with hair like burnished copper and eyes the color of wet slate. His smile was smooth, but didn't reach his eyes. Dorian Bear, he said, his voice carrying a faint accent Lila couldn't place. The whispers weren't lying. You really did put Arden in the ground. Dorian's tone was flat. If you're here to offer condolences, I'm not interested. Not condolences, the man said, pulling out a chair uninvited. Opportunities. Lila's hand rested lightly on her knife under the table. Opportunities for what? The man's gaze slid to her, curious. For survival. Arden's death leaves a hole, and holes attract teeth. You'll have alphas sniffing at your borders within the week. Unless, his smile returned, thin as paper. You have allies. Dorian's jaw tightened. Allies don't come cheap here. No, the man agreed. But neither does living long enough to see spring. Section 35. The price on the table. The copper-haired man leaned forward, his elbows resting on the scarred wood. You don't need me to tell you, Dorian, every wolf between here and the Iron Fens will want a piece of you now. You took Arden's head. That puts a crown on yours. Dorian's expression didn't change, but Lila felt the tension in him sharpen. Get to the point. The man's smile grew, a flash of white in the firelight. You need someone to keep the other predators at bay while you consolidate. My people can do that. And in exchange? Dorian asked. The pause was deliberate. The man's eyes slid toward Lila, studying her like one might study a rare blade. Her. Lila's grip on her knife tightened under the table. Not happening. The man didn't even look at her when he continued. Not for keeps. I don't deal in flesh. But I've heard what you walked out of the cavern with. There are factions, dangerous ones, who'd pay dearly for a drop of that blood. Dorian's voice dropped low. You want to sell her blood? Trade it, the man corrected smoothly. For information, for favors, for things even you can't take with claws and teeth. The cavern's mark is worth more than any alpha's pelt. Lila's pulse pounded in her ears. And you think I'm going to just let you take it? He turned to her then, his slate eyes calm. I think you'll see the sense in securing protection before the scavengers come knocking. One vial, one alliance. It's a better price than most will offer. Dorian leaned forward, his gold eyes catching the firelight like molten metal. If you come near her with a needle, you won't leave this table breathing. The man didn't flinch, though his smile thinned. You're letting sentiment make your decisions. That's not how leaders survive here. I'm not here to survive, Dorian said, standing in one fluid motion. I'm here to make sure the right people die first. The copper-haired man's gaze flicked between them before he stood as well. Then you'd better be ready to fight every alpha on your own. As he walked away, the lodge seemed to exhale, but Lila could feel the ripples that conversation had sent through the room. Eyes had sharpened. Whispers had begun. You just made us a target, she murmured. No, Dorian said quietly, not looking at her. I just made it clear who they'd have to kill to get to you. Section 36, the second offer. They didn't get more than a minute of quiet before another shadow detached itself from the crowd. This time it was a woman. Tall, draped in a coat of midnight blue that shimmered when it caught the firelight. Her hair was black and glossy, braided with thin silver chains that chimed faintly as she moved. The air around her carried a faint scent of rain on stone and something older, sharper, magic. She stopped beside their table, her gaze sliding from Dorian to Lila with a measured slowness that felt like a searchlight passing over prey. I couldn't help overhearing, she said, her voice low and smooth, every syllable deliberate. Your friend was right about one thing. The cavern's gift is worth more than most realize. Lila kept her tone cool. And I suppose you're here to make me an offer too? The woman's mouth curved, though it wasn't quite a smile. I'm not here to take from you. I'm here to give. My people, she flicked her gaze briefly toward a small cluster of figures near the far wall, their eyes reflecting the firelight in faint metallic hues, know how to hide things. People. Power. We could keep your scent out of every wolf's reach. Dorian didn't relax. And your price? Not blood, she said, tilting her head slightly toward Lila. Not directly. But the cavern changes more than blood. It changes the soul. I want to see what it's done to hers. That's vague, Lila said flatly. It's honest, the woman countered. I'd need her to step into my domain, let my magic see her fully. No harm, no theft, just truth. In return, you get my protection and my silence. Dorian's eyes narrowed. Magic like yours leaves marks. I know what you are. The woman's smile deepened slightly. Then you know my marks fade, eventually. Lila studied her. And if I say no? Then I wish you luck, she said simply, and the faintest glimmer of amusement touched her eyes. You'll need it. Without waiting for a reply, she turned and walked back to her group, her silver-braided hair swaying like a pendulum. The weight of her offer lingered in the air. She's not lying, Dorian said after a moment. She could hide you. But you'd owe her more than you think. Lila exhaled slowly. And if we turn her down, she might make sure we can't hide at all. Dorian's gaze slid to the door. Exactly. Section 37, Fire in the Lodge. The shift in the room was subtle at first, low voices turning sharper, glances becoming stares, the way bodies angled as if claiming space. The copper-haired man was speaking in low, clipped tones to a pair of scarred wolves at the far table, while the midnight-clad woman's group had spread out, their metallic eyes tracking everyone. Lila caught the scent of tension, sharp, electric, moments before the first chair scraped loudly against the floor. One of the wolves from the copper-haired man's side rose, gaze locked on Dorian. You've got no claim to Arden's lands, he growled. You kill an alpha, you answer for it. Dorian didn't rise from his chair. You want to test that, step outside. The wolf sneered, but before he could reply, one of the Midnight Woman's people stood. Let him be. Arden was nothing. That was enough to spark it. The wolf swung first, fast, claws out, but the metallic-eyed figure caught his wrist mid-strike. The next instant, the table between them shattered, splinters scattering across the floor. The lodge erupted. Chairs toppled, drinks spilled, and the roar of voices gave way to snarls and the crack of fists on bone. The copper-haired man barked orders to his wolves, while the Midnight Woman stood still, watching the chaos as if measuring outcomes. Stay close, Dorian snapped to Lila, rising in one smooth motion. He caught the arm of a wolf lunging for her and twisted hard, the sickening pop of a dislocated shoulder cutting through the din. Another came from the side. Lila ducked under his swipe and slammed her knife into his thigh. The numbing poison worked fast. He stumbled, his leg going limp. The air grew thick with heat and smoke as the hearth fire roared higher, sparks catching on the dry thatch above. Lila's eyes darted upward. Already, the roof was starting to smolder. We have to move, she said sharply. Dorian's gaze swept the room once, quick and calculating. Back door, he ordered, grabbing her wrist. They wove through the chaos, dodging claws, fangs, and thrown bottles. A horned man tried to block their path. Dorian slammed him aside without slowing. Behind them, the lodge's timbers groaned, flames licking up the walls. They burst into the snow-bright night, the cold biting after the lodge's stifling heat. From inside came the crash of another table breaking and the rising crackle of fire-consuming wood. Lila glanced back. That place is going to burn. Dorian's expression was grim. Good. Let them tear each other apart while we're gone. But in the distance, beyond the tree line, a single howl cut through the night, long, deep, and unfamiliar. That's not one of Arden's, Dorian murmured. Someone new just stepped into the game. Section 38, the new howl. The howl lingered in the cold air, carrying a weight that made the hair on Lila's arms rise beneath her coat. It wasn't a challenge, not exactly. It was a statement. I'm here and I'm watching. Dorian's head tilted slightly, listening to the echoes fade. It's not a voice I know, he said. But it's strong. Too strong for a scout. An alpha? Lila asked. He gave a small nod, his jaw tightening. One with the nerve to announce themselves this close to neutral ground. They're making sure we hear it. The snow muffled their steps as they moved away from the burning lodge, but Lila could feel the sound of that howl vibrating in her bones long after it had stopped. Every instinct told her it wasn't random, it had been aimed. They kept to the tree line, following the faint scent the wind carried, cold fir, pine resin, and something metallic, like blood on steel. Dorian's movements were quiet, but deliberate, his eyes scanning for more than just tracks. Whoever this is, he said after a while, they want us to come to them. Lila frowned. And you're going to give them what they want? His lips curved slightly. No. I'm going to make them think they've gotten it. It didn't take long before they found the place, a small clearing where the snow had been deliberately disturbed, scuffed into a wide ring as if marking territory. In the center stood a figure, tall and lean, his coat open despite the cold. His hair was silver-white, but his face was young, sharp-boned, almost handsome in the way a blade was handsome. Dorian Vare, the man called, his voice smooth enough to carry without shouting. I expected you to look more desperate. Then you don't know me, Dorian replied, stepping just far enough into the clearing to be seen. The man's pale gaze slid to Lila, and she felt the weight of it like frost along her spine. And this must be the Cavern's prize. I was wondering if the rumors were exaggeration. They usually are, Lila said flatly. He smiled faintly. I hope not. I've come to make an offer. Dorian's eyes narrowed. Not interested. The man ignored him. You're carrying something rare, he said to Lila. Something that could change more than just a pack standing. I'd see it protected and cultivated. That's a pretty way of saying controlled, she said. His smile didn't falter. You're clever. Good. Clever prey lives longer. Dorian stepped forward, his shadow cutting across the snow. She's not prey. And if you're smart, you'll remember that. The man's pale eyes gleamed. We'll see how long you can keep her from becoming someone else's. Section 39. The Measured Duel. The silver-haired alpha didn't move at first, but the air between them thickened, heavy with that low, rolling dominance that made even the trees seem to lean away. He was gauging Dorian. Not rushing, not provoking outright, just letting his presence press in like an ever-tightening snare. Dorian didn't flinch. If you wanted a fight, you'd have skipped the talk. The alpha's faint smile deepened. I don't fight without purpose. This is a measure, not an execution. Then he moved. It wasn't the wild lunge of ardent style, nor the brute force most wolves favored. This was precision, a sudden, cutting dash that closed the distance before Lila could draw a breath. His hand shot toward Dorian's throat, claws aimed not to kill but to control. Dorian caught the wrist mid-strike. Snow burst under their feet as they locked in place, muscles straining, the tension vibrating in the air. The silver-haired alpha's expression didn't change. This was still a test to him. Lila stayed just outside the circle, her knife in hand, ready to break the rules if the test turned into something else entirely. Dorian pivoted, breaking the alpha's hold and sending him sliding back a few paces. You measure poorly, he said. The alpha chuckled under his breath. On the contrary. You're faster than I expected, but not faster than I can handle. He came again, this time low, aiming to sweep Dorian's legs. Dorian jumped the strike, twisting midair to bring a clawed hand down toward the alpha's shoulder. The silver-haired wolf caught it, and for a moment they were locked again, strength against strength, each searching for a fault in the other's stance. Then, unexpectedly, the alpha stepped back. Enough, he said, his voice calm, almost casual. I've seen what I needed. Dorian's eyes narrowed. And I think we can speak again, when your situation becomes more dire, the alpha replied. His gaze slid to Lila. You may not want what I'm offering now, but time changes more than loyalties. With that, he stepped backward into the tree-lean, his presence vanishing so abruptly it was as though he'd never been there. Lila exhaled slowly. That wasn't just a test. No, Dorian said, still watching the shadows. That was a promise. Section 40. The Ghost Alpha. They stayed in the clearing for a moment after the silver-haired alpha disappeared, the snow muffling the world until the only sound was their own breath. Lila finally broke the silence. You know him. Dorian's jaw flexed. I know of him. Cael. They call him the Ghost Alpha. Why? She asked, scanning the tree-lean as if expecting him to step back out. Because no one ever sees him coming, Dorian said, his tone grim. He doesn't claim territory like other alphas. He moves through them, testing, tempting, taking what he wants and vanishing before anyone can strike back. That's not an alpha, Lila muttered. That's a thief. It's worse, Dorian said. Thieves don't leave packs torn apart from the inside. Her stomach tightened. You think that's what he's after with us? I know it is, he replied, finally turning from the tree-lean. He'll try to get to you first. Not by force, not yet, he'll use words, offers, whispers in the right ears until the choice feels like yours. And if that doesn't work? Dorian's gold eyes met hers, steady and hard. Then he'll take you. Lila felt the truth of its subtle cold in her chest. So how do we stop him? We don't wait for him to move, Dorian said. We find where he's going to be and get there first. Cael thrives on surprise, we take that away. He's just another wolf with teeth. She nodded slowly. You've fought his kind before. Not like him, Dorian admitted. Most who've met the Ghost Alpha aren't alive to talk about it. Then we'll be the exception, Lila said. A faint smile touched his mouth at her certainty, though his eyes stayed shadowed. You've got a talent for turning near-suicidal ideas into plans. She arched a brow. And yet you always go along with them. Maybe I'm the reckless one, he said, before starting back toward the deeper woods. But as they moved, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere in the darkness, Cael was still watching, smiling that same cold, knowing smile, already setting the next step of his game in motion. Section 41. Old Debts. The snow deepened as they moved north, the trees growing darker and closer together. Dorian kept a steady pace, his posture taut with the kind of focus that meant he was tracking more than just direction. Lila broke the silence. Where exactly are we going? To someone who doesn't like me, Dorian said without looking back. She raised a brow. Sounds promising. She likes Cael even less, he added. And she owes me, sort of. They reached a break in the trees where the snow lay untouched, save for a single set of tracks winding toward a squat, stone-built cabin. Smoke rose from the crooked chimney, curling lazily into the pale sky. Dorian slowed as they approached the door. Let me do the talking. She's not patient with strangers. He rapped twice, then stepped back. A moment later, the door creaked open to reveal a woman with weathered skin, sharp green eyes, and a silver streak through her dark braid. The scent that rolled out was earthy and bitter, herbs, dried roots, and something metallic that prickled at the back of Lila's throat. There, the woman said flatly. Didn't expect you to be stupid enough to come here again. Good to see you too, Mara, Dorian said smoothly. We need information. Her gaze slid past him to Lila, lingering just long enough to make her shift her stance. And who's this? She smells strange. Not your concern, Dorian said before Lila could answer. Mara's mouth quirked. Everything's my concern when it knocks on my door. She stepped aside just enough to let them in. The inside of the cabin was cluttered but warm, bundles of herbs hanging from the rafters, jars of powders and liquids covering every shelf. A fire burned low in the hearth, filling the space with shadows. Dorian didn't waste time. We're looking for Cael. Mara snorted. The ghost alpha? You don't find him, Ver. He finds you. He already has, Dorian said. We need to know where he's headed next. Mara studied him for a moment, then leaned back against the table. Maybe I know. But nothing's free. Dorian's eyes narrowed. What's your price? She smiled without warmth. There's something in the Fenmarsh I want. A root grows under the water, guarded by things with too many teeth. Bring it to me, and I'll tell you exactly where your ghost will be. Lila glanced at Dorian. And if we say no? Mara's smile widened. Then I wish you luck, and a quick death. Section 42, Teeth in the Fenmarsh. The Fenmarsh lay 2 hours east, where the snow thinned into wet, clinging mud and the trees bent low as if listening. Mist coiled over the dark water, swallowing the sky and turning every shadow into a shape that might have been watching. Lila stepped carefully along the narrow strip of half-frozen earth that passed for a path. I take it too many teeth wasn't just a metaphor? Dorian's mouth curved faintly. Not even close. Mara's talking about the Fenlurkers. You hear them before you see them if you see them at all. Fenlurkers, Lila repeated under her breath. That's reassuring. They moved in silence for a while, the only sound the wet suck of mud under their boots. The air smelled of rot and stagnant water, with an undercurrent of something sour, like old bone. The first sound was faint, so faint Lila thought she'd imagined it. A soft, irregular clicking, like nails tapping wood. Dorian froze instantly, one hand lifting to halt her. That's them. The clicking grew louder, circling, though the mist was too thick to see more than a few feet. Lila slid her knife free, her fingers steady, but her pulse quickening. A ripple disturbed the water to their left. Then another, closer. Dorian's voice was low, almost inaudible. They hunt by sound. Step carefully. No splashing. She nodded, shifting her weight with slow precision. The clicking stopped, the silence pressing in. Then something broke the surface ahead, a shape like a jaw without a head, rows of needle teeth snapping in the open air before sinking back into the water. Another appeared to the right, closer. Tell me you know where this root is, she whispered. Dorian's eyes scanned the water. There. He pointed toward a cluster of twisted, black reeds rising from a half-submerged log. They began moving toward it, each step deliberate. But halfway there, the clicking started again, fast, excited. A shadow slid beneath the surface toward them. Run, Dorian said. They broke into a sprint, the water slapping at their boots despite their care. Something erupted behind them, a blur of pale flesh and teeth snapping inches from Lila's shoulder. She slashed backward without looking, her blade catching on slick skin. The creature shrieked, the sound high and wrong, before retreating into the water. Dorian reached the reeds first, plunging his clawed hand into the muck and wrenching free a thick, black root that reeked of iron. Got it. Another lurker lunged from the water's edge. Dorian caught it midair, twisting its body until something in its spine cracked. He tossed it back into the fun, the splash echoing into silence. They didn't stop moving until the marsh was behind them and the first dusting of snow-covered solid ground again. Lila exhaled hard. Next time she asks for a favor, we charge triple. Dorian smirked faintly. Next time, we don't ask for anything. Section 43. The Ghost's Next Move. Mara was waiting when they returned, the crooked chimney still spilling that thin line of smoke into the sky. She opened the door before Dorian could knock, her green eyes flicking to the bundle in his hand. "You're still breathing," she said, a hint of surprise in her voice. "Better than most who go rooting in the Fenmarsh." Dorian handed her the dripping black root. "Your turn." She took it with a gloved hand, her expression briefly softening as she inhaled its iron-tinged scent. Worth the trouble, I'd say." Lila crossed her arms. "The Ghost Alpha." "Where?" Mara's gaze moved to her, studying her in a way that made Lila feel like every bone in her body had just been weighed. "He's clever. Never stays long enough for word to catch him. But he's moving toward the broken pines." Dorian's brow furrowed. "That's too close to the hollow's southern edge." "Exactly," Mara said, dropping the root into a jar of dark liquid where it sank without a ripple. "Cael's not after territory. He's after leverage. The hollow's alpha just lost a sister, murdered by someone she trusted." Lila understood immediately. "He's going to make her think it was you." Mara's smile was sharp. "Or your little prize there. He'll use her scent, her image, twist it until the hollow believes you've been running together for far longer than you have." "That's not just dangerous," Dorian said, his voice low, "it's suicidal. The hollow doesn't forgive." Mara shrugged. "He's counting on that. The moment the hollow moves against you, every other alpha will think the fight is theirs to join. You'll have no safe ground, nowhere to rest." Lila exchanged a glance with Dorian. "Then we go to the broken pines first." "Careful," Mara warned. "If you walk into that forest, you'd better be sure you can walk out. The hollow knows every branch and shadow." Dorian's expression was grim. "Then we make sure they know us too." Mara stepped back toward the hearth, already turning her attention away. "I've paid my debt, fair. Whatever happens now is yours to own." As they stepped out into the snow again, Lila asked, "Do you think he's already there?" "Oh, he's there," Dorian said. "And he's probably smiling, because he thinks we're walking straight into his trap." Section 44. The Broken Pines. The broken pines earn their name well, tall, skeletal trunks split and twisted as if by some ancient storm, their jagged branches clawing at the pale sky. The air was colder here, and still in that strange way that made Lila's instincts itch. They moved silently between the trees, boots sinking into the snow that lay in uneven drifts among the splintered roots. Every so often, Lila caught the faintest movement in the corner of her eye, a shape slipping between shadows, gone before she could track it. "They're here," she murmured. Dorian's eyes scanned the tree line. "Hollow hunters. They've been tailing us since the ridge. Why not just attack?" "They're waiting for the right ground," he said. "Somewhere they have the advantage." Lila's hand hovered near her knife as they pushed deeper. The silence was heavy now, pressing in from all sides. No wind. No birds. Just the muffled crunch of snow beneath their steps. It happened fast. A shape dropped from above, claws outstretched. Dorian shoved Lila aside as the hunter hit the ground where she'd stood, snow exploding outward. A second figure lunged from the right, forcing Lila to duck and slash in the same motion, her blade grazing fur and drawing a hiss. They were surrounded, 5 of them, lean and fast, their eyes glinting with a predator's focus. One stepped forward, a woman with hair the color of ash and a jagged scar running from her temple to her jaw. "Dorian Vare," she said, her voice like splintered ice. "You've been busy." "Not as busy as you're about to be," Dorian replied, his stance shifting into something sharper, more dangerous. The woman's gaze slid to Lila. "And this is the one who smells of the cavern. The hollow alpha will want her alive." "Then you're going to be disappointed," Dorian said, his gold eyes flashing. The hunters moved as one, their speed blurring the edges of the clearing. Dorian met them head-on, claws flashing, his strikes precise and devastating. Lila kept to his flank, parrying a swipe before countering with a quick slash across a hunter's forearm. The ash-haired woman came for her directly, her claws catching on Lila's coat and dragging her close. Lila drove her knee up into the woman's ribs, breaking the grip long enough to slash at her side. The woman snarled but didn't slow, circling like a wolf wearing human skin. Snow churned into mud under their boots. The fight wasn't going to end quickly. The Hollow's hunters were too well trained, too relentless. And every moment they spent here brought them closer to being overwhelmed. Dorian's voice cut through the clash. We break north. Now. Section 45. The Hollow's Alpha. They broke north in a blur of motion, the snow kicking up in icy clouds behind them. The Hollow hunters followed, their pursuit silent but relentless, weaving through the jagged trunks like they'd been born in this forest. Dorian kept his body between Lila and their attackers, cutting down any who got close enough to reach for her. Twice, she felt claws graze her coat. Twice, Dorian's counterstrikes came fast enough to drop the offender before they could finish. The trees began to change, thicker, their bark darker, the snow giving way to frost-covered moss. Lila's instincts screamed they were crossing some invisible threshold. They broke into a wide clearing, and she knew instantly it wasn't empty. She stepped closer to Dorian without thinking. At the far side stood a woman, tall, broad-shouldered, her dark hair braided tight and wrapped with bones polished white as ivory. Her eyes were the green of deep pine, sharp and unreadable. She wasn't dressed for the cold, her bare arms crisscrossed with old scars that spoke of battles won. The hunters slowed and stopped, their formation breaking. Even Dorian's steps faltered. The woman's gaze moved over him, then settled on Lila, lingering in a way that felt both assessing and dangerous. You've brought her here, she said, her voice carrying easily in the cold air. She came with me, Dorian answered, his tone steady but edged. Into my woods. Wearing the Cavern's mark. Lila opened her mouth, but Dorian's hand brushed her arm, a silent warning to let him speak. We're here for Cael, he said. He's playing a game that drags your name into it. We want to end it before it reaches you. The Hollow Alpha tilted her head slightly, her braids shifting with the movement. And why would the Ghost Alpha be so interested in her? Ask him yourself, Dorian said. But you know as well as I do, he'll twist this until you think we're the enemy. The woman stepped forward, her presence filling the clearing in a way that made the hunters seem suddenly small. If I thought that, she said, you wouldn't still be breathing. Her gaze returned to Lila, sharper now. You carry something dangerous, girl. Not just for you, for anyone who stands too close. I'm aware, Lila said evenly. A faint smile ghosted over the Alpha's lips. Good. Then you understand why I can't let you leave without knowing exactly what you are. The hunters shifted at her words, not as a threat but as if preparing for something inevitable. Dorian's voice was low. That's not going to happen. The Hollow Alpha's smile widened just enough to show teeth. Then I suppose we see which of us is faster. Section 46. The Alpha's Judgment. The clearing tightened around them, the broken pines closing in like the ribs of some ancient beast. Snow whispered down in thin flakes, but the cold air felt heavier now, charged with the unspoken understanding that someone might not walk out alive. The Hollow Alpha shrugged off the long strip of fur draped over her shoulders, letting it fall into the snow. No claws from your little hybrid tricks, fair. Not unless you want me to use mine. Dorian's gold eyes narrowed. I'm not here to challenge for your territory. Then you've got nothing to lose, she replied, stepping forward. The hunters backed away to form a rough ring, their breath steaming in the cold. Lila's instinct screamed to intervene, to put herself between them, but Dorian gave her a look, calm, steady, and final. Stay back. The Hollow Alpha struck first, a blur of muscle and speed that would have floored most wolves before they even saw her coming. Dorian slid aside, catching her arm and twisting, only for her to roll with the movement and drive her elbow into his ribs. The thud echoed in the stillness, but Dorian didn't falter. They circled, snow crunching underfoot, their movements sharp and deliberate. No wasted strikes. Every blow tested the other's footing, strength, and control. Slower than I remember, the hollow alpha said, blocking a strike to her jaw. Stronger than you expected, Dorian countered, shoving her back a step. She smiled, and the next moment she was on him again low, sweeping his legs, then surging upward to slam him into a pine trunk hard enough to shower them in snow. Dorian's claws twitched against the urge to tear, but he kept them in check, catching her wrist and twisting until she was forced to release. For minutes they traded blows, Dorian's hybrid strength meeting her pure alpha power. Lila could see it in the tightening of Dorian's stance. He was holding back just enough not to trigger the fight into something lethal, but not so much that she could overpower him. Finally, the hollow alpha stepped back, chest heaving lightly, and raised her hand to halt the fight. Enough. The hunter stilled. She looked at Lila again, her expression unreadable. You're not his weakness, she said at last. Not yet. But you will be. And when that happens, her eyes flicked to Dorian. You'd better hope he's faster than me. Without another word, she turned and walked back into the shadows between the trees. The hunters followed, melting into the forest until the clearing was empty again. Dorian exhaled, his shoulders dropping slightly. That could have gone worse. Could have, Lila said. I thought she was going to tear your head off. She still might, Dorian replied, already moving toward the northern edge of the clearing. But for now, we're alive, and that means we're still ahead of Cael. Section 47, The Ghost's Trail. They pressed deeper into the broken pines, the jagged silhouettes of the trees crowding closer the further north they went. The snow grew thinner here, replaced by patches of frost-bitten earth where roots clawed upward like skeletal fingers. Lila glanced back once, half expecting to see the hollow hunters shadowing them again, but the forest remained unnervingly still. Do you think she'll actually let us go? Dorian didn't look back. She gave her word. For now, that's enough. They moved in silence until the wind shifted, carrying with it a scent that made Dorian slow, faint, but sharp. Cael, he murmured. Lila caught it too, wolf, but layered with something colder, metallic. He's close. Close enough to want us to know it, Dorian said. Which means he's laid the ground ahead. They followed the trail, faint impressions in the frost where someone had walked with deliberate slowness, as if leading them. The path wound between trees whose trunks were split and blackened, their branches bare despite the season. The smell grew stronger, and with it came something else. An almost imperceptible sound, like the low hum of a bowstring. Lila's hand went to her knife. Dorian caught her wrist before she could draw it fully. Careful. Cael likes traps that kill from a distance. They moved forward more cautiously, and soon Lila saw it, a thread of silver wire strung between two trees, almost invisible unless the light caught it. Beyond that, another and another, forming a web of narrow passages through the forest floor. Lila frowned. This isn't to stop us. It's to slow us down. And to make us feel watched, Dorian said. Because we are. The trail ended in a clearing not wide, but open enough that stepping into it felt wrong. And in the center stood a single pine, its trunk stripped bare except for a strip of cloth tied to it. Lila recognized it instantly. It was the torn piece of her coat from the fight in the hollow alpha's clearing. Her pulse spiked. He's been closer than we thought. Dorian stepped forward, scanning the edges of the clearing. He's not just close, he's been following since before we left the lodge. A voice drifted from somewhere unseen, smooth and mocking. It's flattering, you coming all this way for me. I was starting to think you didn't care. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, threading through the trees like smoke. Lila's grip tightened on her knife. Show yourself, Cael. The laugh that followed was soft, knowing. Oh, I will. But not until I'm certain you understand. Every step you've taken here has been exactly the one I wanted you to. Section 48, The Split. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind stilled, leaving only Cael's voice threading through the air, every syllable carrying a weight designed to get under the skin. You've been chasing me, he said, his tone calm, almost conversational. But you've never stopped to ask why I'm letting you catch up. Dorian's eyes swept the tree-line, searching for the source. Because you want something from us. From her. A faint chuckle. Partially true. But you misunderstand the order of things, Bear. I don't want, I choose. There's a difference. Lila scanned the branches above. If you think you can scare us. Not scare, Cael interrupted smoothly. Divide. The word hung there like a fresh scent in the air, sharp enough to make Lila's gut clench. Dorian took a step forward. That won't work. Oh, it already has, Cael said. You're walking beside her, guarding her like she's yours. But deep down, you've wondered, what did she bring out of that cavern? What might it do to you, to your pack, to the careful balance you've fought to keep? Lila's jaw tightened. You don't know anything about me. I know enough, Cael replied. I know you feel it too, that little seed of doubt every time his claws are at someone else's throat. How long until they're at yours? Not because he wants to hurt you, but because the thing in your blood wants out. Dorian's gold eyes flicked to her, just for a heartbeat. Quick, but Cael would have seen it. The silver-haired alpha's voice softened, intimate now, almost coaxing. It's not mistrust, you understand. It's inevitability. You can't cage what you don't understand, and neither of you understands what you've brought into the open. A flicker of movement, Cael stepped into the clearing as if he'd been there all along. The moonlight turned his silver hair to frost, his pale eyes catching Lila first, then Dorian. Here's my offer, he said simply. Come with me, Lila. I'll show you what you are before it destroys you, or him. Dorian moved instantly, placing himself between them. Not happening. Cael tilted his head. Then I suppose we find out how much she trusts you, there, when it's her choice and not yours. Section 49. The Choice in the Clearing. The silence that followed Cael's words was heavier than any threat. Snow drifted lazily between the three of them, and every flake seemed to take an eternity to fall. Lila's pulse thundered in her ears. Learn the truth before it destroys you, or him. The words coiled in her chest like a living thing, because as much as she hated to admit it, they echoed thoughts she'd tried to bury. Dorian's voice broke the stillness. You're not going anywhere with him. Cael's pale eyes didn't leave hers. It's not a command, Ver. It's an invitation. One she's perfectly capable of accepting. Lila felt the pull in both directions. Dorian had saved her life more than once, fought for her without hesitation. But there was a wall between them. A shadow neither of them had been able to name since the cavern. And Cael, he radiated danger, but also certainty. Like he'd already walked whatever path she was on. I can tell you why your blood burns at night, Cael said softly. Why your dreams keep showing you things you've never seen. I can tell you what the cavern left inside you. Her breath caught. How does he know? Dorian's voice sharpened. He's lying. He plays with truths until they're poison. Cael stepped closer, slow and deliberate. Maybe. Or maybe I've seen what happens when a gift like yours is left in the dark too long. It stops whispering and starts taking. Her knuckles whitened around the hilt of her knife. And you just, tell me? Out of the goodness of your heart. His smile was slight, but it didn't reach his eyes. No. Out of interest. I don't believe in wasting potential. Dorian moved a half step closer to her, his voice low but steady. If you go with him, I can't promise I'll get to you in time if things turn. And there it was the choice, drawn like a blade between them. Follow the one who'd fought beside her into blood and shadow, or step into the unknown with someone who might hold the answers she feared to face. Every hunter in the forest could have been watching them in that moment, but Lila only saw the two men, the one she trusted, and the one who might finally tell her who she was. Section 50. The Decision. Lila's breath fogged in the cold air, each inhale sharp enough to sting her lungs. Her gaze flicked between them, Dorian standing like a wall of gold-eyed defiance, Cael relaxed but poised, as if the choice was already his. The forest felt too still, like the broken pines themselves were leaning in to hear her answer. She took a step forward. Dorian's weight shifted instantly, ready to intercept, but she didn't stop. Her knife stayed in her grip, blade low. She wasn't lowering it for either of them. I'm not walking away from you, she said to Dorian. But I'm not walking blind either. Cael's mouth curved faintly. So you'll come. I'll listen, she corrected, voice sharp. That's it. The change in Dorian was subtle, but immediate, the bare tightening at the corners of his eyes, the way his jaw flexed like he was holding back a dozen things he wanted to say. Lila. She cut him off without looking back. If he's lying, I'll know. And then I'll end it myself. Cael's pale gaze glittered. You'll know quickly. The moment she crossed the invisible line between them, the air shifted. It wasn't just the tension, it was the forest. The stillness shattered into motion, shadows breaking into shapes as figures emerged from the trees. Cael's wolves, silent and quick, forming a ring before Dorian could close the distance. Dorian's claws slid out with a soft metallic scrape. Move, he warned them. None of them did. Cael didn't even look at his pack. They're only here to make sure our conversation isn't interrupted. Conversation, Dorian repeated, his voice edged like a blade about to break. Cael's smile thinned. You still have your teeth, bear. Don't make me take them. The first wolf lunged before the last word was out. Dorian met him head-on, the clearing exploding into violence. Snow churned underfoot as claws tore through fur and flesh, the air thick with snarls and the wet crack of bone. Lila backed toward the tree-line, her blade catching the throat of one wolf who broke away from Dorian to reach her. She didn't retreat far, but she didn't cross back to his side either. Her choice had been made, and now they'd all bleed for it. Section 51, The First Truth. Cael moved through the chaos without haste, his presence parting the fight as if the wolves themselves bent around him. Lila barely had time to reset her stance before his hand closed lightly, but firmly, around her arm. Walk, he said, his tone not sharp, but weighted with the kind of confidence that assumed obedience. She yanked her arm back just enough to make it clear she wasn't being dragged. If you've got something to say, you can say it here. His pale eyes flicked toward the melee. Dorian was in the center of it, a golden-eyed blur, dropping wolves faster than they could reform their circle. Blood streaked the snow in violent arcs. No, Cael said evenly. Because every second you watch him fight is another second the thing inside you stirs. Lila's pulse jumped. You keep saying that like you know what it is. I do, he said simply, guiding her around the outer edge of the clearing. Wolves fell back to let them pass, never taking their eyes off her. And I know what it will do if you pretend you can ignore it. Her grip on her knife tightened. Start talking. They stepped into the shadow of a splintered pine, the sounds of the fight dulled but still sharp in the distance. Dorian's low snarl, the yelps of wolves hitting the ground. Cael stopped, his expression calm but unreadable. The cavern didn't just mark you. It seeded you. You're carrying an inheritance older than the packs and older than me. It will burn you from the inside if you don't shape it first. Her brow furrowed. And you're offering to, what? Train me? I'm offering to keep you alive long enough to decide if you even want it. That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters, Cael replied. What's in you will call to others, wolves, vampires, things with no name. They'll want it, they'll want you. Bear can't kill all of them. Eventually, one will take you. I'm giving you another option. The sound of a heavy body hitting the snow hard cut through their exchange. Dorian's voice followed, rough but close now. She already has one. Cael's eyes shifted past her, his smile sharpening slightly. Looks like your protector disagrees. Section 52, When Teeth Meet Teeth. Dorian emerged from the thinning ring of Cael's wolves, his breath misting in short, sharp bursts. Blood streaked his forearms and spattered across his jaw, not all of it his own. His gold eyes locked on Cael, burning with a focus that ignored everything else. Step away from her, Dorian said, voice low, almost calm. Cael didn't move. If you'd put that much effort into explaining the truth, maybe she wouldn't be standing here. Dorian's claws flexed, catching the moonlight. You think you can wedge yourself between us? Cael's pale gaze flicked to Lila, then back. I don't have to. You've already left the space for it. The tension snapped like a pulled bowstring. Dorian was on him in a blur, the clash sending a spray of snow into the air. Cael moved like water, fluid, evasive, meeting Dorian's strikes without letting them land clean. Their claws met in a flash of sparks, the sound ringing sharp in the cold air. Lila stepped back instinctively, the sheer weight of their power making the ground seem smaller. Cael was faster in tight spaces, his movement surgical, every strike calculated to force Dorian off balance. Dorian, in turn, pressed forward with relentless, brutal precision, each blow carrying enough force to shatter bone if it landed. Cael ducked under a wide strike and drove his palm hard into Dorian's sternum, sending him skidding back in the snow. "You've got strength," Cael said, "but you fight like you're protecting something. That's a flaw." Dorian didn't answer. He closed the distance again, faster than before. This time his claw raked across Cael's shoulder, tearing through leather and into skin. Cael hissed, more in irritation than pain, but the first streak of his blood hit the snow dark and heavy. "Not bad," Cael said, smirking through the sting. "But you'll have to do better if you want me to let go." The words barely left his mouth before Dorian slammed into him, both of them hitting the ground hard, rolling through churned snow and blood. Wolves on the edges shifted forward, but Cael barked a sharp command without looking, and they froze. "Lila," Dorian snapped, pinning Cael for a moment. "Get out of here, now." Cael twisted, reversing the hold in a heartbeat. "Or stay," he said to her, his voice smooth despite the fight. "And finally hear what he's too afraid to tell you." Section 53. The Third Player. The two of them were so locked into each other, gold eyes against pale, strength against precision, that for a moment, Lila realized they'd both forgotten she wasn't just some piece on their board. Her fingers tightened around her knife hilt. She could run. She could stand back and let them tear each other apart. But neither of those would give her what she needed. So she moved. Snow muffled her steps as she closed the distance. Neither Dorian nor Cael broke their hold, too focused on gaining the upper position. When she was close enough, she dropped low, swept her leg under both of them, and sent them crashing sideways into the churned snow. They both reacted instantly, Cael rolling to one knee, Dorian pivoting to face her, claws half raised, but the surprise in their eyes was the same. "You're both acting like you get to decide for me," Lila said, her voice cutting through the cold air. "You don't." Cael's pale eyes narrowed with interest. "Then decide, little Cavern-born. Which way will you turn?" She stepped forward, knife still in hand, but not aimed at either of them. "Neither. Not until I get the truth from both of you. All of it." Dorian's jaw flexed. "This isn't the place." "This is exactly the place," she snapped. "Because if I walk away now, one of you is going to follow me, and the other's going to kill him for it." The wolves in the tree line shifted, restless at the standoff. Cael leaned back slightly, his smirk returning. "I could be persuaded to talk. But it won't be pleasant to hear." Dorian's gold gaze locked on hers, steady but shadowed. "If he tells it, I'll tell it. Then you'll know why I've been keeping it from you." Lila took a breath, steadying herself. "Fine. Start talking. Both of you." The air in the clearing changed, not with movement, but with the weight of things unsaid finally pressing forward. Cael's smile thinned. "Then you're about to learn why the Cavern chose you, and why no one leaves it unchanged." Section 54. Two truths, one lie. Cael's voice carried first, smooth as silk over steel. Long before the Pax claimed these lands, the Cavern was a tomb. Not for bones, for power. It was built to hold the remnants of something ancient. Something that could shape flesh and blood into more than either wolf or vampire. Something that could breed its will into anyone who touched it. His pale eyes flicked to Lila. "When you went inside, you weren't just trespassing. You were chosen. The Cavern marked you as a vessel." Dorian's jaw clenched, his claws flexing in the snow. "That's the part he likes to tell, because it makes you feel special. And you'd prefer I feel cursed?" Lila said, meeting his gaze. "If it keeps you alive, yes," Dorian replied, his voice sharp. "The truth is, what's in you doesn't just shape. It feeds. It wants more than a vessel. It wants a body, a voice, control. And the stronger you get, the more it will try to take." Cael smirked. "Fear makes a poor leash, fair. She needs to know what it is before she can resist it." "You mean before you can use it?" Dorian shot back. "Use her." Cael's tone was mock-offended. "No. I'd protect her. Help her grow. Make her something untouchable. Which is more than you can promise while you're still afraid of what she is." Lila looked between them, pulse hammering. "So, let me get this straight. You both agree I'm carrying some ancient. Whatever it is. You just disagree on whether it's going to destroy me or turn me into something stronger." "Not stronger," Dorian said. "Different. And once you're different enough, you won't be you anymore. Cael's smile was slow, deliberate. Or maybe she'll be more herself than she's ever been. Her stomach tightened. And I'm just supposed to decide who's telling the truth? No, Cael said, stepping closer. You're supposed to let me prove it. Dorian's gold eyes sharpened. Over my dead body. That, Cael said softly, is one outcome I'd accept. The wolves around them stirred, sensing the air turn heavier again. Section 55. When the Cavern speaks. The first lunge came from one of Cael's wolves, breaking the tension like glass underfoot. Dorian was already moving to intercept, but before he could, something in Lila surged forward, fast, fierce, and hungry. She didn't think. Her arm snapped out, catching the lunging wolf mid-stride. Except it wasn't just her arm. It was as though her whole body had sharpened into a weapon. Her grip locked around the wolf's throat, not crushing but holding, and she felt its pulse pounding under her fingers like it was her own. The forest stilled. Cael's smile widened, slow and predatory. There she is. Lila, stop. Dorian's voice cut through, tight with warning, but her senses were too heightened, the air thick with heartbeats and heat. She could smell the iron in the wolf's blood, hear the subtle creak of its bones beneath fur and flesh. It would be easy. So easy. Something inside her whispered, not in words, but in instinct, take. Her grip tightened. Lila. This time Dorian's voice wasn't just warning, it was command. A pull in it that resonated against whatever was inside her. She wrenched her hand back as if she'd touched fire, shoving the wolf away. It scrambled backward into the trees, whimpering. The surge of power didn't fade immediately. It lingered like heat under her skin, restless and unsatisfied. Her breath came quick. What was that? Cael stepped closer, eyes alight. That was the Cavern speaking through you. You didn't call it. It called you. Dorian moved between them, his stance defensive now not just toward Cael, but toward her. And next time it calls, you might not be able to hang up. She swallowed hard, the aftertaste of that raw strength still on her tongue. It hadn't felt wrong. It had felt, terrifyingly, like coming home. Cael's voice was almost gentle. You can fight it forever and bleed yourself dry, or you can learn to hold it without letting it hold you. I can teach you that. Dorian didn't take his eyes off her. And I can make sure it never uses you at all. She realized then, they weren't just fighting over her. They were fighting over it. Section 56. The Truce. The wolves still ringed the clearing, restless, their breath steaming in the cold air. Dorian stood rigid, claws half-bared, ready for Cael to make the smallest wrong move. Cael, infuriatingly calm, looked like a man who had all the time in the world. Lila had had enough. Stop, she said, and her voice came out sharper than she meant, but it worked. Every head turned toward her. Even the forest seemed to pause. You're both so busy trying to win, she continued. You're forgetting I'm the one standing in the middle of this. My power, my choice, my risk. You don't get to decide what I do with it, neither of you. Dorian's jaw tightened. You think he's just going to respect? I don't care if he respects it, she cut in. I care if he agrees to it. Right here. Right now. Cael tilted his head, his pale eyes narrowing with faint amusement. And what exactly am I agreeing to? A truce, Lila said. You both stand down. No attacks, no games, no dragging me off in the middle of the night. I decide when I train, how I train, and with who. That way, I get the truth from both of you, and I get to figure out if either of you is worth trusting. The silence after her words was taut. Dorian looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression must have stopped him. Cael, on the other hand, looked delighted. I'll agree, Cael said easily. On one condition. Lila's eyes narrowed. Which is? When you finally choose who to trust, it's binding. No going back. Dorian stepped forward. No. He doesn't get to put terms on. Yes, Lila said, cutting him off. I'll accept that. Both men stared at her for very different reasons. Cael's smirk deepened. Then it's a truce. Dorian's gold eyes didn't leave hers. You'd better be sure about this. I'm not, she admitted. That's the point. The wolves melted back into the trees at Cael's signal, leaving the three of them alone. For now. But Lila knew she'd just set something dangerous in motion, one she might not be able to stop, even if she wanted to. Section 57. The Ambush. The cold settled heavier once Cael's wolves were gone, as if the forest itself was holding its breath to see if the truce would break before it even began. Dorian stayed close, still keyed for a fight, while Cael kept just far enough away to make the space between them feel like a dare. Lila opened her mouth to say something, then froze. The air shifted. A low hum, almost too faint to hear, vibrated through the ground under her boots. The scent hit a second later, smoke, but not wood smoke. Something chemical. Dorian caught it too. We're not alone. Figures emerged from between the splintered pines, their shapes blurring against the frost. They weren't wolves, no scent of fur or blood, just an acrid tang that made Lila's teeth ache. Masks hid their faces, glass-eyed and inhuman, the rest of them covered in heavy armor patched with strange metal plates. Cael's voice was low. Hunters. Not mine. Not his. Dorian's stance dropped into something predatory. Then they're here for her. The first bolt struck a tree trunk near Lila's head, the hiss of its passage followed by the sharp crack of impact. A thin trail of steam rose from where it had embedded, the bark sizzling. Lila ducked low. What the hell was that? Poison silver, Dorian said, moving to block her. And not just for wolves. Cael's expression sharpened. They're from the Ascendancy. Who? Lila demanded, scanning the tree line for another shot. People who think what's inside you should belong to them, Cael said. And they'll take it apart piece by piece to get it. The hunters fanned out, moving in unnerving silence. Their weapons gleamed faintly in the moonlight, crossbows and hooked blades etched with the same strange metal. Dorian's claws slid free. So much for the truce. Lila looked between them. You two going to fight each other or fight them? Cael's smile was quick and feral. Depends which is more fun. The next volley came fast, forcing them into motion, Dorian charging straight into the nearest hunter, Cael vanishing in a blur and reappearing behind another. Lila moved with them, her knife ready, but the hum in her blood told her the cavern's power was already awake again, waiting to be used. Section 58. The Price of Power. The first hunter came at Lila fast, their blade catching the moonlight in a flash of cold metal. She parried with her knife, the clash ringing in her bones, but the second hunter was already closing from the side. The hum inside her blood grew louder, threading into her thoughts, a single, undeniable urge: open the door. She didn't know what that meant until she stopped fighting it. The world slowed. The hiss of poison silver in the air stretched into long, drawn-out threads. Every movement around her became distinct, Dorian ripping the weapon from a hunter's hands, Cael snapping a neck in one fluid twist, a crossbow string vibrating as it released. She stepped into the path of the bolt, not to dodge it, but to catch it. Her hand snapped up, fingers closing around the shaft. The metal burned her palm, but she didn't let go. The hunter who'd fired froze in shock. Lila moved before thought could catch up, her knife slicing the air, the motion too fast for them to block. The blade found the weak seam between armor plates, and they went down. The hum didn't stop. She felt the heartbeat of every living thing in the clearing, thick, fast, intoxicating. She could push into those rhythms, slow them, quicken them, stop them. The power inside her pulsed like a second heart, whispering that she didn't need a blade at all. A hunter lunged, and she turned without raising her knife, letting that inner pull reach out. Their stride faltered mid-step. Breath caught in their throat. They dropped to their knees, clutching at nothing, eyes wide in silent panic. The power wanted more. It wanted to end them. Lila. Dorian's voice slammed through the haze. Her grip on the hunter's life loosened, and they collapsed forward, gasping but alive. The hum faded reluctantly, like a predator being called off prey. Her knees felt weak. I didn't mean to. Cael's pale eyes shone, sharper than before. That wasn't the cavern speaking. That was you. Dorian was beside her in an instant, one hand on her shoulder. And now they've seen it. Which means they'll come back. Stronger. Lila's stomach tightened, because she already knew he was right. And worse, part of her wasn't afraid of that. Section 59. The Ascendancy's Plan. The clearing stank of blood, frost, and the acrid tang of whatever foul mixture coated the hunter's weapons. The snow was churned into a patchwork of red and black mud. Only one of them still breathed, a broad-shouldered man whose mask had been torn away in the fight. His lip bled freely where Cael had struck him, but his eyes burned with defiance. Dorian crouched in front of him, claws still slick. "You're going to talk." The man spat into the snow. "You think I'm afraid of you?" "No," Cael said from behind him, voice smooth as ice over water. "But you're afraid of me." The hunter stiffened as Cael knelt, pale eyes locking onto his. The silence between them stretched until the man's breathing hitched, just slightly. Cael's tone was quiet, almost conversational. "The Ascendancy doesn't waste their soldiers on random targets. They sent you here for something specific. So tell me, soldier, what does your master want with the girl?" The man's eyes darted toward Lila. That flicker of recognition was all she needed to know. He knew exactly what she was. "You already know," the man said. "You were there when the first one was taken." Cael's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Yes, and I know how long she lasted before the cavern burned her out from the inside. But that's not your plan this time, is it?" The hunter's jaw tightened. Dorian's claws slid just enough to catch the man's cheek, a thin bead of blood rising. "Talk, or I let him take his time." The man exhaled slowly. "We're not going to burn her out. We're going to split her." Lila's brows knit. "Split me?" His gaze flicked back to her. "Separate the host from what's inside. Keep the power. Throw away the rest." Cael's expression shifted, just a flicker, but it was the first sign she'd seen of anything close to real anger. "You don't have the means." The hunter gave a grim, humorless smile. "We do now. The forge is ready. The bindings are older than your pack wars. We'll pull it out of her and chain it." Dorian's claws sank deeper into the snow. "Where?" The hunter clamped his jaw shut. Cael leaned closer, his voice a silken blade. "If you make me find you again, I won't just take your life. I'll take every memory you've got and feed it to the dark." Something in the man's resolve cracked. Black Hollow Forge. South of the ravine. Cael rose to his feet, brushing snow from his coat. "Then we don't have much time." Lila's skin prickled cold. She didn't know what a Black Hollow Forge was, but the way both men looked at her after hearing it told her one thing: getting there would be worse than the fight they'd just survived. Section 60. Toward the forge. The hunter's body lay still in the snow, his last breath steaming into the cold night air. Cael didn't bother looking back at him as he started toward the northern treeline. "We move now," he said. "If the Ascendancy's already preparing the forge, we can't afford to wait." Dorian fell in step behind him, though his attention stayed locked on Lila. "You're not going anywhere near that thing until we know exactly what it does." "It splits me from the thing inside," Lila said, repeating the hunter's words. "Or kills you trying," Dorian countered. Cael glanced over his shoulder, smirking faintly. "That's assuming Vare's precious morality doesn't get in the way. The forge doesn't care about intent, it will take the power, one way or another. If she's strong enough, she lives. If not..." He let the sentence trail off. They moved through the broken pines in silence after that, their boots crunching through snow crusted with frost. Lila's mind wouldn't stop turning the hunter's words over. "Separate the host from what's inside. Keep the power. Throw away the rest." Dorian's voice finally broke the quiet. "The forge isn't a solution. It's a weapon. It was built to strip away anything supernatural, wolf, vampire, witch, doesn't matter. And no one walks away whole." Cael's reply was casual, but his eyes stayed fixed ahead. "That's the point. The Ascendancy will use it to cage what's in her, then put it on a leash. You want that?" "Because I don't." "Funny," Dorian said. "I was just thinking you'd love that kind of control." Cael's lips twitched. "Only if I'm the one holding the leash." Lila slowed her pace enough to fall between them. "If I go to the forge, how do I know either of you won't try to use it for yourselves?" Neither answered immediately. Dorian's jaw worked like he was grinding his teeth. Cael smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't belong anywhere near trust. "You don't," Cael said finally. "That's what makes this interesting." Lila didn't respond, but her grip on her knife tightened. Because for the first time, she wasn't sure whether she feared the Ascendancy's forge or what these two might do when they got there more. Section 61, The Outpost. The wind cut sharper as they descended into the low ravine, the broken pines thinning into skeletal brush and frost-coated rock. Moonlight spilled over a squat structure ahead, stone and rusted metal, half buried under snow. It was the kind of place you'd miss unless you were looking for it. Dorian slowed first, scanning the shadows. That's an Ascendancy outpost. Cael's voice was low, but there was an edge to it. Old one. They abandoned these when the last war ended. Then why's there smoke coming from the chimney? Lila asked. Both men froze. The faintest curl of gray rose against the pale sky, carried off by the wind. Dorian's claws slid free with a soft metallic scrape. We go in quiet. The outpost door gave way under Dorian's boot, the interior reeking of oil and iron. The air was stale but recently disturbed. Dust coated everything except for a table in the center of the room. Maps were spread across it, weighed down with old iron bolts. Lila stepped closer, her eyes scanning the yellowed parchment. A rough sketch of the Black Hollow Forge took up most of one map, but what made her stop was the detail beside it, a set of notations in a tight, slanted hand. Her eyes flicked to Dorian. These markings, do they mean anything to you? He leaned over her shoulder, his expression darkening. It's a wolf code. Old. Before my time. Cael stepped forward slowly, gaze fixed on the paper. It's not before mine. Lila caught the subtle shift in his tone. You've been here before. Cael's pale eyes met hers, unreadable. Once. Years ago. I wasn't alone. Dorian's voice sharpened. You should have led with that. I didn't think it mattered, Cael said coolly. Until now. Lila pointed to a second map in the stack, this one marked with an X south of the forge. What's there? Cael didn't answer immediately. His gaze stayed on that X, a heartbeat too long. Dorian's claws tapped against the table, slow and deliberate. Looks to me like our truce is about to crack. Cael's mouth curved in the faintest smile. Only if you can't keep up. Lila looked between them, unease curling in her gut. Because whatever that X marked, she was starting to suspect it was the real reason Cael wanted to reach the forge. Section 62, The Thing at the X. The map weighed heavy in Lila's hands, the X marked in dark ink like it had been pressed there with intent. Cael folded the parchment carefully, slipping it into his coat. We're going there first. The forge is priority, Dorian said flatly. Cael didn't flinch. The forge will still be there. This might not. Lila stepped between them. We go to the X, then the forge. If this turns out to be another one of your games, Cael, I walk. His smirk was faint but genuine. Fair enough. The path to the marked point cut through a stretch of the broken pines, so dense the branches clawed at their clothes. The cold bit deeper the further they went, until even Cael's breath misted in the air. When they broke into the clearing, the first thing Lila saw was the stone. It was a slab, easily the size of a hunting cabin, lying half-buried in frost. Its surface was carved with the same sharp, curling runes she'd seen in the cavern, but these glowed faintly, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. Dorian's claws flexed. This shouldn't be here. It's not a what, Cael said quietly. It's a who. The realization hit as the glow intensified. The slab shifted, stone grinding against stone, and a shape began to rise from beneath it, a figure, humanoid, but wrong in ways that made Lila's skin crawl. Pale skin stretched too thin over long limbs, eyes hollow and burning from within. The voice that came from it was a whisper wrapped in thunder. Cavern-born. Lila took a step back. What is it? Cael's jaw tightened. The first vessel. It turned its gaze on her, and something in the air pressed heavy on her chest. It had carried what she now carried once. And the sight of her was waking something in it. You will come with me, it said. We will be whole again. Dorian moved to block it. Over my dead body. Its head tilted, almost curious. Easily arranged. The runes flared, and the clearing filled with heat. Section 63, The First Vessel's Claim. The heat rolled off the runes in waves, turning the frost to steam around their feet. Lila's pulse spiked. Not from fear alone, but from recognition. The thing in front of her was made from the same power threading through her veins, and it knew it. Dorian didn't wait for it to move. His claws flashed, slashing across the creature's chest. The sound wasn't right, more like cutting stone than flesh. The first vessel didn't bleed. It barely reacted. Its hollow gaze stayed fixed on Lila. The forge cannot help you. It will only unmake you. But I can give you what it took from me. Cael stepped forward, his voice edged. She's not yours to claim. The vessel's head tilted. You are not hers to protect. The runes pulsed again, and the ground shuddered under their feet. The slab beneath it began to sink, pulling the vessel down with it like a door opening into the earth. Dorian's gold eyes shot to Lila. Don't let it pull you in. The air thickened, a dragging force curling around her limbs. Her instincts screamed to fight it, but the hum inside her blood whispered something else. This is where you began. This is where you belong. She dug her boots into the softening ground. No. The pull intensified. Her vision flickered, half in the steaming clearing, half in the cavern's black depths. She saw flashes, another time, another life, the vessel's hands on hers as they touched the cavern's heart. Cael's voice cut through like a blade. Lila, listen to me, if you go down there, you won't come back. Her knife burned hot in her hand. On instinct, she drove the blade into the glowing runes. The light flared, then cracked, splintering through the carvings like lightning through ice. The vessel's voice rose in a distorted roar, the pull vanishing as the slab sealed shut again. Steam hissed from the seams, and the clearing fell still. Lila staggered back, breath ragged. Dorian was at her side instantly. You good? She nodded, though her pulse was still erratic. We need to get to the forge. Now. Cael looked at the sealed slab, his pale eyes unreadable. Agreed. Before it finds another way out. Section 64. The Black Hollow Forge. The trek to the forge was a blur of frozen wind, shifting shadows, and the heavy silence that comes when everyone knows they're walking toward something final. The land grew harsher the further south they went, snow thinning to patches of black rock, the air metallic and sharp. When the forge came into view, Lila understood why even Cael's voice went quiet. It rose from the side of a jagged cliff, its structure part stone, part ancient metal so dark it swallowed the moonlight. Iron pipes jutted from its walls, venting plumes of smoke into the sky. The front doors were massive, bound with thick chains that pulsed faintly with the same eerie glow as the runes on the vessel's slab. Dorian stopped first. It's awake. Cael's lips curved faintly. Good. Saves us the trouble of finding the key. As they approached, Lila felt it. The forge's pull was different from the vessel's. This wasn't calling to her blood. It was calling to the thing inside it. The power in her shifted restlessly, like a caged animal catching the scent of freedom. The chains uncoiled on their own. They know we're here, Dorian muttered. The doors swung open, releasing a rush of hot air that smelled of ash and old iron. Inside, the forge glowed with a hellish light. Massive gears turned slowly overhead, feeding molten streams into a deep basin at the center of the chamber. And around that basin stood the Ascendancy. A dozen figures in their blackened armor, faces hidden behind masks. At their head, a woman in robes streaked with ash stepped forward. Her voice carried easily over the rumble of the machinery. Bring her, she said. No one moved. Cael smirked. You'll have to take her. The woman tilted her head. Gladly. The first wave came fast, Ascendancy soldiers fanning out, silvered blades raised. Dorian met them head-on, a blur of gold eyes and claws. Cael slipped into their flank, his movements sharp and precise, every strike finding a gap in their armor. Lila hung back, blade ready, but the forge's heat pressed into her bones, the whispers from inside growing louder. We could end this. Let me show you how. She clenched her jaw. Not yet. The robed woman's eyes found hers. You can fight us, or you can be free. The pull surged again. This time, Lila didn't know if she could resist. Section 65. Breaking Point. The heat from the forge became a living thing, pressing against her skin, winding around her spine. The whispers inside her blood sharpened into words now urgent, hungry. Take it. Take all of it. Dorian tore through another Ascendancy soldier, his gold eyes locking with hers for a split second. Lila, stay with me. But the robed woman was already moving, weaving her hands through the air in sharp, deliberate patterns. Chains of molten metal erupted from the forge, snaking across the stone floor toward Lila. She dodged the first, slashing at it with her knife. The blade melted in her hand, the steel dripping away in molten droplets. She dropped it with a hiss. You can't fight the forge, the woman called. It was built to strip away what you carry. Without me, it will tear you apart. The chains lashed again, one coiling around her wrist. Heat flared through her skin, but instead of pain, she felt connection. The thing inside her pushed upward, not resisting, but meeting the forge's pull. Cael's voice cut across the chaos. Lila, if you let it out now, it's not going back in. The second chain caught her other arm, the heat now racing through her chest. She could feel the edges of herself blurring, the part that was her and the part that was it beginning to merge. Dorian was coming for her, cutting down anyone in his way, but the robed woman slammed her staff into the ground, and a wall of flame roared up between them. Lila's breath came in shallow bursts. The chains weren't holding her anymore, they were feeding her. Power surged through her veins, bright and overwhelming. The robed woman stepped closer, her eyes gleaming through the haze. Yes, feel it. This is your birthright, Cavern-born. You and I could burn the ascendancy, the wolves, the hybrids, everything to ash. Dorian's voice thundered from beyond the flames. Lila, don't you dare let her. The whispers inside her drowned him out. Her skin glowed faintly now, cracks of light running along her arms like veins of molten rock. And for the first time, she didn't want to stop it. Section 66. All or nothing. The forge's light roared through her veins, eclipsing thought. Every heartbeat in the chamber echoed in her skull. Dorian steady and defiant, Cael sharp and calculating, the Ascendancy soldiers frantic and fragile. She could snuff them out with a thought. The robed woman's voice wrapped around her like silk. Choose, Cavern-born. The first fire is always the sweetest. The power inside her surged toward action, begging to be used. She turned her head, eyes locking on the Ascendancy soldiers surrounding the basin. They were armed, ready, dangerous, but so breakable. Burn them. Dorian's voice cut through the haze like a golden thread. Lila, look at me. She did. And for a moment, the roaring inside quieted. His expression wasn't fear, it was trust, fierce and unshaken even with the heat rippling between them. Cael's pale eyes were harder to read, but there was a sharpness there, a silent message. If you're going to use it, make it count. The robed woman raised her staff, molten chains tightening on Lila's arms. They would see you caged. I would see you crowned. The words scraped against something deep inside her. She realized then that the choice wasn't between holding the power or unleashing it, it was between letting it rule her or making it obey. Her hands clenched, the molten chains shattering in a spray of sparks. The power didn't burst outward in chaos, it coiled close, under her skin, like a blade waiting for a command. No one crowns me, Lila said. She turned the force outward, not at Dorian, not at Cael, but at the Ascendancy soldiers. The wave of heat and light swept through them like a storm, their weapons melting in their hands, their masks cracking away. They fell, not dead, but broken enough to crawl from the chamber. The robed woman stumbled back, shock breaking her composure. You. Lila's palm opened toward her. The power surged, but she stopped it just short of burning the woman to ash. Leave. And if I see you again, you won't. The woman vanished into the smoke, her retreat swallowed by the rumble of the forge. The light under Lila's skin began to fade, leaving her trembling but standing. Dorian stepped through the settling heat, his hand finding her shoulder. You stayed, you. Cael's smile was faint but genuine. For now. Section 67. Sealing the forge. The forge rumbled like something wounded, the molten basin churning in restless waves. Without the Ascendancy to control it, the heat began spilling into the air unchecked, searing against their skin. Dorian glanced upward, watching the gears grind. If we leave it like this, someone else will find it. Cael's eyes swept the chamber. There's a seal hidden in the framework. Old magic. You break the right connection, the whole structure will lock down and bury itself. Lila's gaze shifted to the runes carved into the iron pillars around the basin. They pulsed faintly, like the slab in the clearing, like the cavern walls. It's the same language. Cael gave a small nod. And you're the only one here who can speak it. The thought made her stomach tighten. If I do this, it's gone. No one can use it. Not even me. Dorian stepped closer. That's the point. She hesitated, the weight of the choice pressing down. This forge could make her stronger than any wolf, vampire, or hybrid. It could make her untouchable. But it could also turn her into something unrecognizable. Her eyes found Cael's. He didn't look disappointed, just watchful, as if he was willing to see which way she would turn without pushing. She pressed her hand to the nearest pillar. The runes flared hot under her skin, and the forge reacted instantly, the molten metal in the basin rising toward her like it recognized its own. Let go, the whisper inside urged. We could keep this. We could rule with this. She shut her eyes and forced the words into the runes, not the command to awaken, but the command to sleep. The light dimmed, the molten waves receding. One by one, the runes along the walls guttered out. The gear slowed, then stopped entirely. The basin cooled into black glass. The forge was dead. Lila stepped back, her palms stinging. It's done. Dorian's relief was obvious, even if he didn't say it. No one's using it again. Cael's expression was unreadable for a long moment. Then he inclined his head in the faintest acknowledgement. Your choice. Lila looked between them, the silence heavy with the next decision she had to make, the one neither of them could help her with. Section 68, the last choice. The forge's chamber was quiet now, the air cooling with every passing moment. The glow under Lila's skin had faded entirely, leaving only the ache in her palms and the thud of her heartbeat in her ears. Dorian stood close, steady as ever, his gold eyes watching her like he'd been holding his breath through the entire fight. Cael leaned against one of the now-dead pillars, arms crossed, his pale gaze sharp but patient. Neither spoke. They didn't have to. Both of them knew what came next. You both want something from me, Lila said, breaking the silence. You've wanted it since the cavern. But I'm not the girl who walked in there anymore. Dorian's voice was low. I never wanted the power. Just you. Cael's mouth curved slightly. And I wanted you with the power. I still do. Lila took a slow breath, the forge's cold air filling her lungs. You've both fought for me. Bled for me. Lied to me too. And I think I understand now why. Her gaze moved between them. Dorian's loyalty had been absolute, but it came with a constant weight of protection, of shielding her from herself. Cael had offered her freedom, but it was tangled with temptation and danger. She stepped toward them, stopping in the space between. I'm grateful to you both, she said. But I can't belong to either of you. Not now. Maybe not ever. This thing in me, it's mine to carry, mine to decide what to do with. And I need to find out who I am without someone else pulling the reins. Dorian's jaw tightened, but he nodded slowly, the respect in his eyes genuine even through the disappointment. If you ever need me, I'll find you, she said. Cael's smirk was faint, almost soft. Careful, little Cavernborn. Walk too far alone, and you might start to miss the wolves at your side. She almost smiled. I'll take my chances. With the forge sealed behind them, Lila stepped out into the night air. The stars above felt colder, sharper. She didn't know where the road ahead would lead, whether she'd face the ascendancy again, whether the vessel under the slab would return. But she knew one thing, the choice, for once, was hers alone. And that was enough.